Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order from our previous, I guess we probably should have actually set a recess, but we just moved the meeting over without a specific time on it. And the first, I guess, presentation under the discussion of alcohol issues. Let me ask, I know we've got different groups, and I want to make sure that we give people adequate time. I know the SOAR folks are here. Is there anybody else that's representing a group or of 6 or more people? The reason I'm asking that because how many people are here with SOAR? Okay.
No, because if you say you are,
Here's the thing, that you do, like they're gonna make the presentation for you then, so I can't do the thing, so.
It's a discussion of the TNR. A lot of people are here for the cat discussion, TNR. That's not with SOAR.
Okay, that's what I was asking, I didn't know who all was who.
That's not the agenda.
No, you know what, like, let me go back, the commission pointed out something, citizen comments, we need to do citizen comments first. Anybody here that's wanting to talk on issues other than the animal control issue? You can talk about anything else on the agenda or not on the agenda, just want to give that opportunity. All right, seeing none, then we'll move on. And the first group that asked us to speak was SOAR, so I'll turn it over to them. They have a presentation that you want to make. And the way this works then, if you're part of the group, then these are your folks. So you have a 30-minute block of time. But that doesn't mean everybody from the group's going to come up and do the normal 5-minute thing that we would do. And I hope you all understand that's just how we have our rules and procedures that we have to follow. So I will turn it over to you folks. And if there's folks from talk about any other animal issues, you can still come up and make your presentation. We're just going to let SOAR go first because they had asked us to be on this agenda.
Well, we all support SOAR, but we all kind of have a little bit of, it's the same thing,
Okay.
just different instances that.
So even if you're on the official board of SOAR, you can't speak to it?
No.
Okay.
It's just if you're going to speak on behalf of SOAR, then I'm going to give the whole group 30 minutes as a block of time. But if you want to do, then you're only going to get, then I'm going to cut people off when they get to 5 minutes because that's what our rules and procedures say. That's what I was trying to find out. I don't want, if you're with SOAR, I don't want you to do your 30-minute block and then everybody come up and say I want to speak because that's not how.
So if you want to speak to the issue that SOAR is addressing, it has to be in a 30-minute block?
No.
Because after, once the discussion
if you're part of a
is going,
group.
they can speak, right? Like
Do you want me to just read the rules so people, should I just read that?
we can go, we get it.
You
We're
don't have
just citizens who love the animals and we're supporting SOAR, but we also want to talk about the cats
Yeah.
in addition and just helping to improve the ordinance.
Because what we try to get away from is we want the public to be able to come in and address us, is the thing. But the problem is we're bound by the written laws and procedures that we follow.
I think there are 3 official members from SOAR here.
And you don't, just so you know, you don't have to do 30 minutes. We're not going to time you and say you've only gone 29
I'll
and
make
a
it
half.
really fast.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Do you want me to read that to you, or do you?
They said they're ready.
Okay.
They said they're good.
We are good. Go ahead.
Well, I'm Tracy Miller, and I'm the founder and president of Speak Out and Rescue, and we're here tonight because of the anti-chain law that was passed.
Let me ask a question. Do we need to, sound-wise, to be on the recording? Because this is not on Cable 10, but it's on our channel. People can still,
You have to go.
They need to go to the podium, otherwise.
because
they will
otherwise
not be
you're
heard.
not going to be heard.
It won't be on the record.
And we can scoot that, if you want to, you can scoot that over there closer. Yeah, or you can stand up there and talk. Don't trip on the cord.
Thank you.
Okay. We are here tonight because of the anti-tethering law that was passed back in December 2010 is not being enforced at this point, and we are here to address that issue and to hopefully get the problem rectified. And I'm just going to show you a quick PowerPoint of what's going on here in the city right now. First, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what chaining is, and it's the practice of tying up a dog for purposes of confinement. And tethering is inhumane and unsafe for dogs because they suffer immense psychological damage. It makes them neurotic, anxious, and aggressive. And this bear was a dog that I personally rescued and adopted from right here in the city. And this was back before the ordinance was passed. Many cases, the chain will get embedded in their necks, and they have to become, they have to go to the vet to get those untangled and cut out. And this was one such dog back in Lexington, back in 2009. This was a dog that we encountered here in Frankfort back in 2010 when I went on Mark Pardai's rounds with him during the day, and this was one of the dogs that we encountered that day. This is an extreme safety hazard for people because chained dogs are almost 3 times more likely to bite than dogs who are not, and they are usually male unneutered dogs. And this is also a dog that we encountered when I was with Mark on his rounds back then in the day, and as you can tell by that bucket that he's holding, that dog hadn't had food or water, and it's hard telling when. But that's usually what we encounter when we check on chained dogs. They usually have overturned water and food bowls. Most of them are not provided with veterinary care. They lack exercise and heat, temperatures, and cold, and that's something that we would also like this commission to consider passing. They have to eat, sleep, and eliminate in a single confined area, and chained and pen dogs are rarely ever given even minimal affection. Most people will not change their behavior unless the law requires it, and we support reasonable anti-chaining laws for all cities and counties in Kentucky. And that's what we found over the last 6 years, that people will not change their behavior unless they are forced to do it. And this dog's name was Belle, and she was here in the city back in 2010, and we also rescued her. And this was an extreme case of neglect and abuse here in the city in Frankfort. I think this person was prosecuted, but nothing ever came out of it. This is the ordinance that you have now, and I'll go back to it at the end of the slideshow so we can talk about what you have on the books now. This was a dog named Big Boy, and this is the reason that the law was passed in the first place, because he hung himself in his own backyard, and we do not want that to happen again. Even if it's one dog, it should not happen. Since we last met here, there have been 2 attacks on humans by chained dogs in Frankfort, and yes, they were in the county, they were not in the city, but it very well could happen in the city if we don't rectify this problem. I was able to track down Heather Moore, and I went to her house and spoke to her. She was the person that was attacked by the 3 chained dogs, and she let me photograph her injuries, and they are very severe. And the reason she's not here tonight is because she had an appointment with her plastic surgeon. But we don't want to see this happen again. I mean, if she wouldn't have gotten help by those passerbys, she would have probably died. And these are the most recent victims of the non-enforcement of this law. Zeus is on the left, and he just moved into the city about a week ago, and when we got there to check on him, Animal Control had already been there and informed the people that it was okay that Zeus is allowed to be kept on his chain 24/7 as long as the people can see them from inside their house, and that is not what the law says, and it is not what was intended to be passed. And the dog on the right is a dog that I don't believe lives outside 24/7, but nonetheless, on this day, the law was being broken. And this is Drake, one of the main reasons we are here, and we've been working on this dog to get it help for a few months now, and he is chained up on Schenkel Lane. He was very thin, and every time we were there, and we were there multiple times, he had no food or water, and a citizen actually gave him straw in the winter time and a 50-pound bag of food, which the owner was still not feeding their dog properly. And in our opinion, this dog should have been confiscated and the owner cited because of this, and nothing happened. And one of the things SOAR does to prevent chaining is we offer outreach to build fences for people who cannot afford it. And most people that chain their dogs cannot afford it. And we build fences, we pay for it, and our volunteers put it up. And this is one such fence that we did here right after the ordinance first passed. We had been to this home, and the people basically told us to get off their property. Their dog had been chained for, I think, 12 years, and they didn't want our help. But the minute this law kicked in, they called us, and we were able to go help them, and they were very grateful. So we also support minimum space requires of 150 square feet per dog because of things like this, dogs being kept in these like rabbit hutches. And that's the fence. And this was the fence, one of the fences that we built here in Frankfort for Athena. We cover 8 counties, and of all the counties that we cover, Frankfort is the only city that has passed a strict anti-tethering ordinance, and it is something that you should be proud of because we do a lot of presentations throughout the year to colleges, schools, other commissions, and we always tell them about this ordinance. And now that this relationship between SOAR and animal control has been severed, it's embarrassing, and I mean, I hope that you will see fit to correct this problem soon. And we are here because of a dog named Emma. This was the first report that we got about non-enforcement. And she was in the city, and back in September was the first call that we got. And yes, she was being chained 24/7. And again, animal control had been to the home and told the people that it was okay for this to be going on as long as they could see the dog from their windows. And we went multiple times, and I do have other pictures, I just didn't include them on this presentation. At no time could you see this dog from any of these windows. All the blinds were always shut. There was never anybody attending this dog. And on the right, you can see the owner had posted a sign to the tree informing the neighbors to not feed or water his dog because they were spoiling it. But yet the neighbor had to step in because the owner was not taking care of his own dog. Eventually, this dog was rescued by SOAR and is now adopted by our very own Lori. But this young man that owned this dog, he allowed the neighbor to purchase this dog in exchange for school clothes. So this dog meant nothing to him. And she was very close to her fence line, and had she tried to jump with that tether on, she probably would have hung herself. So that's the end of it very quickly, and if you can take it back to where the ordinance is. It's a little bit hard to see, but you all have a copy of it. I'm sure by now you know what it says. And in it, it says that a dog may temporarily be tethered, tied, or chained if attended by its owner or any person over the age of 14. And then down in E, it goes on to say a person is considered to be attending a dog while tethered if the dog is under the person's direct and immediate control and supervision. And we all know what temporarily means. It does not mean 24/7, in no way. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. And then E is, we think, self-explanatory too, because if I'm in my house watching my dog on a chain, if something happens, it is not under my direct control. I would not be able to reach out and break up a dog fight, or if my chained dog attacks somebody, I would not be able to immediately get that dog under control. So I think this is where we're having the problem. When we first proposed the ordinance, our proposal does say, and you have a copy of that too, they should be physically attending the dog. So, and for some reason that was not put in the ordinance. We think this is a very strong ordinance right now, as do our attorneys. But somewhere along the line, somebody has found a loophole or has interpreted it on their own, and it's no longer being enforced. And we know that it was being enforced for at least, we think, 3 years, because every time Mark Pardai, Animal Control, got a call, he would give them our brochure, and tell the people they were in violation and that they had 7 days to correct it. And then the people would call us, or sometimes Mark would call us, and we would go to the home and try to work with them in any manner that we could to fix the problem. So somewhere along the line, there's been a severe breakdown, and we would like to know why. Thank you.
Is that your concluding presentation?
May I ask a question, Mayor?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
When you stated that your relationship had been severed, what do you mean your relationship with Animal Control has been severed?
Mark used to, like I said, Mark used to call us, and we worked together. I mean, everything was great. And again, anytime that we presented to a commission, we would say that, because oftentimes Animal Control won't work with us. I don't understand why, but with Frankfort, everybody has been great to work with. And then suddenly, Mark now does not take our calls. We have to call dispatch ourselves, and there's been just a severe breakdown. There's no communication whatsoever now.
Thank you.
Any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Miller? Okay. Aaron, did you want to say anything? If you don't mind, just come forward and just state your name, and we'll...
Can I go first? I gotta get that cat out of here.
Oh, you have a cat?
I'm so pardon.
You have a cat?
No, I don't, because I'm only gonna take 1 minute, but I've got a just spayed, trapped cat out there that I have to get rid of. You all know me, I'm Debbie Bramlage. Pardon?
I heard it go meow. Where is it?
Yeah, it's out in the hall in a trap.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it just got fixed, one less bunch of babies. I just wanted to ask you all, I handed this out to you, that when you are considering what Tracy has talked about and presented, that I just think it's important to keep in mind, we are not an island, that there are at least 15 states in this country that have a state ordinance limiting or banning dog tethering. And they also have exceptions, like, you know, if you've taken it to field trials or you're doing something like that, they have those things listed. There are myriad communities, townships, counties, and other political subdivisions of states across the country that have ordinances similar, not necessarily as well done as ours. They vary in scope and enforcement, but what I was able to note in everything that I researched, they all seem to support enforcement and respect the law as it's been written, not as somebody somewhere over here over Mark is decided to interpret it. And I've given you a website there that is pretty comprehensive, unchainyourdog.org, which you can verify a lot of this information for yourself. One of the other things that is worth keeping in mind when you're considering this is that studies have shown in areas where they have anti-tether laws, some of the positive results are better use of resources, okay, within the entities, such as a decrease in dog bites that have been reported in the years following enacting the ordinance, decrease in unwanted litters of puppies by dogs that are just chained out and they're in heat and, you know, somebody's always letting something rove, and reduced cruelty cases reported, which then don't have to be prosecuted. And that's a sense I have, is that there's kind of a reluctance to have to deal with these things, to prosecute individual people. And the only other thing I would like to say is maybe we should start thinking of this as animal services instead of animal control, that it's about public safety and animal welfare, which go hand in hand when you're reducing dog bites and aggressive animals and so on. That maybe it would just be easier to deal with this issue if we think of it as animal services and not animal control. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, I'm sorry, I gotta get this cat out of here. There, Barbara.
Did you want to, because, I forgot, I failed to introduce, we have our county attorney with us also tonight. Mr. Rick Sparks has graced us tonight to be here to listen, and I guess, I don't know if you want to ask questions, if you're going to say anything later, we'll let you, whatever suits you, sir.
I'm Barbara Murray, and the only thing I want to add is that my property backs up to where the newest chain dog is, Zeus. And I was there the day that they put him on the chain, and ever since then he has cried 24/7 to the point he no longer has a voice. He can't bark, he can't do anything. He's on like maybe a 6-foot chain at the most, and I hear it day and night, and it just breaks my heart to see him in that condition. They don't play with him. They don't. He's a lawn ornament to them. I just like to see that change where he doesn't have to go through that. I'll help him with a fence or whatever to make that happen, but they're not lawn ornaments. They need attention and they need care. And I called animal control on it, and sure enough, just like she said, they told him it was fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Erin Wright, and I wanted to speak towards the first woman's comments about use of resources. I had a dog chained up in my area, middle of the day, no shelter, food, or water. And it took 4 different phone calls to have Mark Pardai dispatched to this location, and that is a waste of resources. By the time I made the phone call to police dispatch made the call to Mark Pardai, and then Mark Pardai called his boss to have him call me to tell him about the situation. That's a lot of waste of time when we're all going through police dispatch for all of our different concerns. So just from a financial standpoint, fiscally it's not responsible, humanely it's not responsible. And at the same token, when Mark is called, in the past, it was the point where he would call one of us who made the phone call to get further information. Sometimes we can't get the address, we see it from a different road or a different angle. And now, I don't know what end it's coming from, but we no longer are able to even speak directly to Mark. And so that game of tag and trying to piece the information together has been very challenging. And in an emergency situation, whether it be a human being attacked by a dog or a dog being hung over East Main, you know, a 30-minute phone call shouldn't take a 30-minute phone call to have results for something like that. So.
Thank you.
My name's Angie Stewart. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a boxer who, it could be seen from inside their house, but it was tied up in their backyard, and so I stopped and knocked on the door, and I said, do you know that your dog is so tangled up in that playhouse out there that it can't even move? He's like, yeah, we just haven't had time to go out there. And, we always ask, well, do you want to get rid of the dog? And most of the time they say no, but he was like, yeah, you can have it. So I went back there to get the dog off the leash, and it was nothing but skin and bones. He weighed, I think, 35 pounds when we got him to the vet. He was 20 pounds underweight. While these people are sitting inside. We have pictures of him, too. So I don't get, because it is the law. It is in the ordinance. So why is it now okay? It just doesn't make any sense. We had the big uproar about the dog, being tied up out when it was 10 degrees below zero, and, nothing being done. We have to call over and over again and, make a big deal. And that's not, we don't want to harass anybody or anything. And I've told Rick Sparks, it's not that we're the crazy animal people. If your granny was sick and needed some chicken noodle soup, we would take it to her. But nobody is calling us for that. They're calling us about these animals. And, we lose sleep at night and, run out all of our own gas and spend money that we don't have to try to make a difference. And And it's the law. It's in the ordinance. And all we want is for somebody to enforce it. That's it. That's all. And there's cats too that need help, by the way. Not just the dogs.
And Ms. Stewart, if you need, you can follow up. Do you have my email address?
Yes.
Then I can make sure you get it. That's a
Yes.
joke.
He said don't ever do that.
No, I was just, but just call me. Call me at home.
Yeah, that's me.
Can I say something else?
I think we got over 3,000. It was a lot.
Can I say something else, Mayor?
Pardon me.
Can I say something? I'm sure that your calls are, animal control's calls are going to be going up, if they haven't already, about barking dogs and chained dogs, because they go hand in hand. And I know our complaints have started coming back in pretty good again since all of this. And after the law was passed, we weren't coming here near as much as before. And now, just this morning, I got another complaint about a chained dog, and I haven't been over there to check on it, but they're just trickling on in, and it should not be when there's something already in place to protect them.
And just so you know, I was just teasing with Ms. Stewart. We've had meetings and stuff. Anybody else? If not, I was going to just explain a little bit too. After we got the first emails back in January, I guess it was, had conversation with, I guess, the city attorney. We talked on the phone, and police chief to look at the ordinance for the part about the animals being outside. And one of the things we talked about, there are other ways we could make that better, but the current law that we have, the reason that it was adopted in 92 or 93, the first one, I think it was first 90, it was 92 or 93?
92.
92. And some of the reasons that we construct our city ordinances the way we do is so that we can have some flexibility and leeway in enforcement, whereas if it says animals can't be left outside below 30 degrees, if we're at 31 degrees, but there's ice coming down and torrential rain, is that obviously would not be a good situation for the dog. But if our ordinance says it's 31, well, it's 31 degrees and it's not 30 degrees yet, so we can't do anything. So those are some things I think that we're looking to people to help us with on ways we can tweak this and make it better for owners, neighbors, the animals. And I know when I spoke with Chief Wilhoit at that point, we went back to this section of the ordinance too, where when it was passed 4 years ago, there were some members on the commission that wanted to allow people the opportunity to have their dog outside if they were maintaining that eye contact or being able to see it. I didn't happen to agree with it. I think, I don't know if you remember,
Commissioner Wilder.
Oh, so Commissioner, you weren't on the commission with us, were you? I was going to
None
ask.
of us were on that commission.
I was going to say, if
Mayor.
you could help me remember if there was anything else, but we had a back and forth on that, and it just sort of fell out. So I'm just like, that's how we got to that point. And it's the same part. If it mirrors another section of the ordinance that says animals do not have to be on a leash when they're being walked if they're under the constant control of the owner. So if the owner has a very obedient animal that will follow commands and stay next to his or her owner, being on a leash really doesn't matter. But some dogs or animals that have to be on a leash may take off running after somebody, and so that's where part of that language, I guess, was taken from.
They're still tethered, but it just defines like attended tethering,
Yeah.
not off the leash.
And when I said the immediate control and supervision, I think I don't know that came down to a point where this ordinance was interpreted as, well, the person may not be in the backyard with the animal, but the person that owns the animal is sitting on a chair inside their family room and can look out their patio doors and see the animal. And so that's where some of that, I think, came out. And I don't want to speak for that, but those get to be issues where that may be how we got to this point, because I don't believe that our animal control officer is the kind of person that would just ignore an animal that needs help.
Mark would not. It's not him. And we would like for the police to explain to us why this is happening, because they are Mark's boss. Mark knows that this isn't right, because when I first called him about Emma being chained, he came and met me there, and he told me, he said, I have been instructed to tell them that they can sit in their house and see the dog from inside their house. And I said, you know that's not what the law says. And he knows it too, and I think it's really sorry that he never has to appear at any of these meetings. And he should be allowed to come and speak.
And what he's been telling owners of chained dogs now is that as long as you are home, you can have your dog chained up, according to his direct supervisor. So you can have somebody in the house without even having to see the animal, and they're not breaking the law. And he also told me when I kept calling on Drake, the pit bull who was tied up on Shinkle, he said, Aaron, honestly, unless the dog is in an extremely severe situation, my boss and my boss's boss are not going to give me permission to pull this dog. And my response was, do we have to wait for it to get to that point?
He has no authority. He has to go check something out and then go back and ask for permission. Mark, yes.
I don't know if they're going to hear, like, the thing about, I probably shouldn't let a whole lot of, because go back and forth conversationally without being at the microphone, because it may not get on. It's actually these little microphones that we're recording through, not these. But I don't know if the police chief or the county attorney or the city attorney want to comment. They don't have to. They're here to. I mean, I think they're here to listen. I certainly do not want to put them on the spot. But if they
When
want
the
to,
ordinance was passed,
do you want to add? Do you want to add anything? Just to maybe explain to folks what we look at when we try to construct an ordinance, and how then it gets the wording in terms of enforcement, and I guess
If it were
dog owners'
for
rights
3 years, why didn't it be enforced?
as well, because we have taken, I don't look at a dog or a cat as property, but under the law, that's how the legal system will look at that.
I know, but none of that should matter, because we have a law in place, and that law was working, and for some reason it is not now, and somebody should answer for it. I know that maybe the police weren't for this, or maybe even Rick Sparks was not for this, but it is a law now, and it should be enforced. And so I think instead of us here having to prove our case, they should be up here explaining to us why this is not being enforced any longer, before we have another tragedy in this city.
Which none of us want. I don't know, do you want to try to answer that?
I'll be
Mr.
happy
Attorney?
to discuss the language of the statute or the ordinance which says a person is considered to be attending a dog while tethered if the dog is under the person's direct and immediate control and supervision. And when the ordinance was passed, I was here, and it was the wisdom of the city commission, to the best of my knowledge, that if a person was sitting at the kitchen window looking out over the sink washing the dishes, and the dog was tethered in the backyard, and they could see the dog, and they could observe the dog, and they could whistle to the dog. That whistling wasn't specifically mentioned, but that's what I've added in that case, that was not a violation of the ordinance. And I think that that's still the proper interpretation of the ordinance. I would say that perhaps Chief Wilhoit could come up and tell us whether or not the interpretation of the ordinance has changed, because to the best of my knowledge, the interpretation and enforcement of the ordinance has not changed since it was passed in 2010.
Okay. Chief, do you mind coming up and explaining a little bit about what the city attorney just mentioned? And because we did actually ask for an animal control discussion, so because of that, I'm going to be a little bit more flexible in the way we normally do our meetings, if nobody objects to that. But as long as it stays under control, because we wanted to have input from folks on this, just to try to figure out after the thing and the situation in the winter in January, and then with the other things that have popped up. So we want to hear that, and it's a work session, so we can be a little bit more flexible, even though we're in this room here where we're at our commission meetings where we got to be extremely strict on our rules, but because it's a work session, we'll be a little lax if everybody can just kind of work with that. Sorry, Chief.
Well, to my knowledge, any caller information that we get is checked out by either the animal control or a patrol officer.
Is that in your face?
It is.
Can we turn that?
There's my face.
I just realized that that's in the chief. That's got to be blinding.
Well, there we go. That's all right.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, go ahead.
To my knowledge, I do have a question. When Ms. Miller says she's, the supervisor or the supervisor's supervisor, have you met with those gentlemen?
Is it Lieutenant Sutton? Is that
And Major Abrams?
just Sutton? Just Sutton.
Well, I guess my point is if it goes from that point, rather than have a trial on the police department, you and I have worked together before. I allowed you to ride with Mark Pardai. You could have called me. We could have sat down and met with all the parties and discussed this. But it's, in my mind, a political kind of thing now because of the tethering thing. You asked about Mark Pardai's cell phone. What you don't know is he asked to have his cell phone number blocked or changed because of all the calls he was getting. And that's why we want the calls to go through dispatch. It's like we wouldn't want you to self-report all your accidents or whatever. We need a log, an area, a centralized point. If you just call Mark's cell phone, it doesn't, number one, the incident doesn't get tracked, It's
Not good for him.
I know you hate playing 5,000 questions with the dispatcher because, they have a protocol. They want to, find out if it's a legitimate call, whatever, that there's a complainant, somebody we can talk to. But I think a meeting in between all of this probably could have assuaged some of these concerns. I would hope they would anyway. Because if those individuals are not interpreting the law correctly, then we could have gone to either the county attorney or the city attorney without this show in order to determine that. And I'm still willing to do that. But if this is a, police department trial, please let me have my witnesses and we'll go forward. And we're willing to work with you. We really are. Or I am. And as the head of the department, I can make that go downhill. That's physics in my world. That kind of stuff goes downhill.
Could you explain though? We know for the first at least 3 years that it was enforced that anytime Mark went on a call, he would give the person our brochure and he would tell them they had 7 days, they were in violation, they had 7 days to fix it.
To my knowledge, they should still be if that's the ordinance.
He's not, and when we met with Lieutenant Sutton, he's the one that told
Yeah,
us
why don't we
that.
just,
Should we stop that?
yeah, we are.
We can handle this in a face-to-face meeting with the principals if you like. Because they can have this back and forth.
That section right there, we can, I think, after I had the meeting with the chief, I felt confident that every call that was coming in was being addressed. And the reason, that if I can also say this on the policy part, on the cell phone use, if it's better for people calling about an incident to go through dispatch, and it is as well as it is the officer or the animal control, which is an officer, or the city employee, because it will keep that logged and tracked. If it's just going straight to their phone, it doesn't generate a report automatically. So why don't we let that under the chaining part, the tethering part for you guys, if you all would be willing to meet with our Major Abrams.
With me and whoever we deem necessary for the meeting, I'd be more than happy.
And we can have the
That
city.
does, and no way solve this. If you are still going to interpret this to say that somebody can sit inside their house while their dog's chained out, that does no good. And I very much beg to differ excuse me for saying, that we all know, Mayor, you were here in 2010, and know where, yes, Celis Wilder, he was the sole commissioner that wanted it to read like that, and everybody protested, and that's why it's not in here. If we wanted that in this law, that would say that. It would say, you can sit in your house as long as you can see the dog from inside. I think it would say that. But it doesn't, because that's not what was intended to be passed. That is very frustrating and demeaning, really, because to know that it was being enforced, and now it's not, and now there's dogs cropping up all over the city.
Commissioner, did you want to make a point?
I do, if it's okay. Ms. Miller, if I may make a point from what I'm understanding, is it does seem like there is an internal issue that's going on. I'm more than happy as a commissioner to volunteer myself to sit in on a meeting that takes place. If you want a commissioner to be a part of it, if you want the mayor to be a part of it, I can't speak for him or any other commissioner, but you could have two of us without having a quorum. I'm happy to volunteer my services to sit in as well, to have a little more inside voice of what's going on, if that makes any sense to the rest of the commission. It seems, though, there is a lack of communication that has happened. And maybe it isn't a lack of communication, maybe they're just misinterpretation of communication, like a telephone game. And I think it makes sense for everyone to sit down at a table together and let's get this discussion rolling without, we don't have to do this at this setting. We don't have to. I mean, we can do this all night. I'm more than happy to sit here all night and do this. But sometimes things work out better if we can have all the parties involved there, and let's discuss. Let's figure out what's not working and how we can get this ordinance enforced like it was when it was first written.
Thanks. And Commissioner Roach needs to run, so I'm going to let him speak real quick. He had a question or a comment.
Statement. I agree with Commissioner Hedden. I think we need to have a meeting that deals with one aspect of the issue. The definition of the ordinance and these terms that there's dispute on what they're supposed to mean, I think is another issue, and that can be addressed either in tightening the language one way or the other, either making it more unlikely to have the tethering that you're describing occur, or make it broader to allow the tethering to occur. But you can change the language to accommodate that, and the commission then can decide whether or not they want to go that way or not. And I think that would be done in the context of the things that we're doing already on this bigger picture ordinance as well. So I think these things can, rather than the back and forth thing, I think that Commissioner Hedden is right, a meeting there, and then this other issue and some related issues can be dealt with as we're dealing with them already.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And Mayor, one thing to address an issue that you raised, and that is we have a number of provisions in our current ordinance that address cruelty to animals. And if a dog is left on a tether for a month without food and water, there are a number of ways the owner of that dog can be charged and prosecuted as a violation of the city's ordinance and also as the violation of the state statute precluding cruelty to animals. And I think if you ask Mr. Sparks, who's the county attorney that prosecutes these matters, he'll advise you that many times when he's prosecuting an individual who has mistreated an animal, he doesn't look to the specific provision of our ordinance. What he does is he prosecutes them for a violation of the state statute. Because he finds that to be a more effective way to prosecute someone who is mistreating an animal. So, and if Mr. Sparks wants to discuss that, he can. But we do have several tools in our ordinance already that preclude someone from mistreating an animal, whether it's leaving a dog out there for 6 days without food and water, or some other way.
Okay, well, the county attorney's here, so he can
All night.
just come up, but we will, I say, just everybody be respectful since
Thank you.
we are still in a meeting.
I told y'all 4 years ago not to do this. And here's why. I said they wouldn't back it with money, didn't I, Tracy? I said you got one animal control officer out here, pass all the laws you want to, but the cops are busy with drugs and criminals, and Mark Pardi's running around chasing dogs that are being neglected and abused. Was that not what I said?
But the law was.
I said if you're going to do it, back it with money. This commission, sitting 4 years ago, had not the fortitude to back it financially. And I say it again to you now. If you're going to pass a criminal law, get me cops, get me investigators, and say what you mean, not what you don't mean. What you did 4 years ago is you gave me Mark Pardi, who does as good a job as he can when he can do it, with a law that requires a 7-day notice on an animal that's on a tether. See that dog right there? Now, if y'all think for a second I'm going to waste time on a city ordinance that's a baby B misdemeanor because of that neglected dog versus a full balls to the wall Class A misdemeanor that I can arrest on site, guess which one I'm going to do? So, okay, I'm going to tell y'all what I think
That
about
dog
it.
has to suffer until he gets to the balls of the wall.
Ma'am, I'm speaking to the
Yeah, let's
with all
don't
due respect.
jump
Motion
in.
for order.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. If that dog was brought to me, that dog would be removed by warrant tomorrow. If I had an investigator who brought the case with photographs like Mr. Pardi does, it'd be at the Humane Society where I would make a motion to forfeit and or destroy the dog, as disposing of the dog as the case would be. It is property under the law. That's what I have to do. That dog was never brought to me, but if it was, I can promise you the city ordinance would never come into play. That's a neglected dog on the photograph. If you seek to change the ordinance, and I commend you doing it, I would ask you to do two things. Pay for it. Give me 2 more animal control officers at a minimum. And say what you mean. I was here for the discussion 4 years ago where those members of the commission at the time wanted exceptions for individuals who were inside their home and their dogs were temporarily tethered outside. What you did was you put a loophole in there because, see, I can't prove where somebody's at inside their house when all I've got is an animal control officer who can't get inside the house. Okay, that was what the commission said, under direct supervision. My car's under my control in the parking lot right now. If you want to tighten it up, say don't do it under penalty of really bad things. Say if you're not out there within 10 feet of your animal, it's illegal. Then we don't have a problem. You didn't say that. You said tethering's okay if they're under your supervision and control. I can't prove that case. That's why I go with the state law. State law says any animal subject to cruel or injurious maltreatment is subject to a Class A misdemeanor, and there's no 7-day requirements, and we pull them. Take me back to Miss Moore's dog, ma'am, if you don't mind. The one that bit there that you said was tethered.
I just have pictures of her. I don't have pictures of
Yeah, that dog wasn't on a tether. I'm sure Miss Moore would have preferred that.
No.
And that dog is charged right now before the court. Motion for order.
That was the last one that was attacked.
Thank you. I was going to speak to the commissioner. The 3 dogs that attacked the lady out in Ball Knob, they were charged with animals running at large. That animal was not
That's what
tethered
I
at the
thought.
time of
They
the
weren't.
attack. But that is a good example of what happens when dogs are neglected for lack of socialization. But what I need as a prosecutor is I need somebody who can prove it. I tell the General Assembly all the time that when they want to pass a law, that's great. Give me some more cops on the street, or don't waste your time. I will say again to the commission, as I said 4 years ago, if you wish to tweak this, we can do it really easy. Say no dog shall be left alone more than 10 feet away from its owner. I challenge if you desire to do that, say it. And give me 2 animal control officers to do it. Otherwise, what we have to deal with from a prosecution standpoint is, I answer the question, is the dog in and of itself looked as though he's been neglected or abused or maltreated? If so, we're going with the state law. If not, I have to wait 7 days before I can take a citation that in most cases results in a $50 fine and a court cost. There's no provision as broad as state law that gives prosecutors the flexibility to respond to these, but we're only as good as the eyes on the field, which is what SOAR and others have been beneficial and vital to protecting proof. I would point out that the case of Big Boy, we did not have an ordinance. That dog was abandoned by its owner in favor of its parents, and they were out of town. We did not need a tethering ordinance to prosecute the Big Boy case. We had a really good state law in point. My point of being here was just to remind you of what we do on the floor I guess, when the rubber hits the road. And if your desire is to tighten this up, and I think there's a valid argument, you got good people here trying to prevent problems, then do it, and really mean it. If you don't want your dog tied up, say you have to be within 10 feet of your dog. If you want to have a loophole, the criminal law specifically, by definition, since 1787, is interpreted in favor of the defendant, not the government. So whenever you've got a possible loophole, it's going to go in their favor. And if it says under control, that means if you've got your dog walking down the street with you beside him and it's a well-behaved dog, it doesn't have to be on a chain. Those laws have broad interpretation in favor of the accused, not the other way around. So that's how we interpret it. And I will tell you, that dog right there, assuming that's everything that you see, skinny dog, would take a vet out, Pardai would do it, they'd call me, we'd have a warrant, I'd send to ask for a police officer to go out with Mr. Pardai, that dog would be seized, the Humane Society, and be charged with cruelty to animals.
While you're here, do you mind asking, because we're looking at, this was just one part, we're looking at the whole aspect of animal cruelty, neglect.
Yes, sir.
Where folks had talked before about this last winter, the temperature being cold, and the way our ordinance is written now, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it says extremes of temperature. Is that the language, something to that effect?
See, that's really hard to get to the meat.
So I was going to say, so what would you think it would be better to be a more to be broad or to be more specific in terms of, because one of the things we talked about was some breeds of dogs like cold.
You know, Danish people park their kids outside of coffee houses all winter long, and they think you're strange if you don't leave them out in the cold. I mean, what I try to do is to take issues that require interpretation, and no offense to Danish people, their kids are really tough, but to take those interpretation options out of the way. You can list as many details as you want on a prohibited ordinance. There's two kinds of bad things in the world. There's those things that are just objectively bad, as lawyers we call them malum per se, and there's things that are bad because you say that they're bad. That might not really be bad right now, you know, but they were bad a long time ago, like selling alcohol. Now you sell alcohol. They're called malum prohibitum. They're only crimes because you say they are. Leaving a dog or a thin-haired dog outside in the cold without food or water, do you really need a statute to say don't leave your thin-haired dog out in the cold without food and water? Because we have cruelty to animals, which covers that anyway. And I always have pointed out, if you take discretion out and you try to do that, that's when you come up with these loopholes. If you say, unless it's under 30 degrees, who gets to say when it's 30 degrees? The more tighter you try to make it, by definition, you create more loopholes than you solve. It's a problem. It's a solution in search of a problem. If you really want to see animal services or animal welfare cases prosecuted and protected correctly, you'd work with groups like SOAR. You'd allow them to assist in adoptions out. You'd financially support animal control officers to have at least 3 on the street. You can't just write it out and hope it's going to work, because we can have the most egregious situations in the world approach, and we have. Unless there's investigators who can investigate it to compile proof, it's not going to fly when it hits court. That's why when in doubt, I've always preferred to use the state law, because it's broader. It doesn't have the menu listing of items and requirements. And frankly, I don't like to wait 7 days when something's really bad to say, hey, this is really bad, do something about it. I mean, maybe that's just me, but if it's so bad and it's such a crime, why don't you get rid of that and just yank the darn dog at the time? Why wait 7 days? Well, I got to wait 7 days. So if I'm in doubt and there's an animal out there being neglected and on a tether, I mean, with all due respect to the commission, I ain't going to use that law. I got another one. So I just wanted to let you know how we do it.
No, that's
good, bad, or indifferent. That's how it's done.
Just so that folks know that we get different components. The city attorney doesn't prosecute. The county attorney prosecutes in because it's Franklin County, the level, and our police department has chosen to have an animal control officer because the city participates by having an animal control ordinance. Cities are not required under Kentucky statute, correct me if I'm wrong, you two, to have animal control officers unless we have an animal control ordinance, which we have chosen to do. We could repeal, rescind all of our sections and throw that back on the county, but would the county fiscal court, fund the position to cover city?
Well, it's similar, the
So-
county is required to provide an animal shelter or in lieu thereof, contract, et cetera. That's why you have the relationship with the city and the county, both with the Franklin County Humane Society. But all I want to ask the commission, and I don't care how you do it, but we have to make it work once it's all said and done. I'll ask you the same favors I asked 4 years ago. If you're going to change it or at that time pass it, and they didn't, fund it. Make it a priority, not just a paper. If I've got an investigator who, in the 7 days or whatever, can come in and say, this dog hasn't been off the chain, we've been there, then I know that. If they come back and owner says, yes, we brought the dog in last night, and there's nobody to say anything different, guess what happened to that dog last night? It came in last night, because they don't have any proof to the contrary. It doesn't do any good to just tweak languages of ordinances without enforcement mechanisms. And if I've got them, we'll use them. But if not, sometimes you just have to back up. But somebody said there are many ways to skin a cat, but I don't think that's an appropriate analogy in this situation.
That was on
the other issue. But at the end of the day, there's many ways to solve the problem. And if the problem is animal welfare, we're doing the best we can with the resources we've got. Just be certain to realize whatever you do, the law of unintended consequences is going to be paragraph F.
And that's been I think just to echo too, that's been our big issue with thinking our animal control ordinance covers certain issues. In reality, we still have a work in progress that needs from time to time to be tweaked a little bit, per se. And I don't know if commissioners, do you mind if do you want to answer any questions
Oh, I'd
from
like to
commissioners,
take any
or do
questions
you?
from anyone.
Certainly didn't
Just
want
wanna get that
to
out.
put you on the spot, but
I just have like a question, comment. You said, like, I guess you're just using it as an example, but you could be 10 feet away on the inside of the wall and the dog on the outside of the wall.
Oh, that's what I said. If you want to make it clear, here's how you do it. And it's like, if people were serious about different things, they'd say, well, if you get convicted, you lose your right arm. Well, you'd see a couple right arm people, that would happen again. If you want to be serious about no tethering, say that you shall be within 10 feet of the dog at all times, period. Now, does that mean inside? Maybe they're within 10 feet. Then you got a proof problem. There is no law that you can create that another attorney can't find a loophole that I ain't got to fight or Mr. Moore's got to fight tomorrow. But by saying it as precisely as possible, fund the enforcement, you minimize those kind of things. When you say direct and immediate supervision and control, supervision means you're watching it. Control means you could intervene if something happened. Immediate, who knows what immediate is? That's going to be for a trier fact. In America, we use juries still. So a jury would have to decide if it was immediate control. The problem that you get into is can you put up a case that they were or they weren't when there is an exception, one that came up during the city discussion, of inside the residence or in other areas or in the backyard with your back turned. I mean, where do you draw the line? We've tried to draw the line and find a balance between harm, which has been cruelty to animal charges, or notice by way of animal control as to the harm that may occur by adoption out or whatever. And you can't cookie cutter a law that's going to cover everything. There's always going to be an exception. And the bad part about it is the exception is always the worst thing. Bad cases make bad law. All I'm asking to do is if you choose to tighten it up, and that's great. We're open 24/7. Court will be tomorrow morning. Throw some cash at it, man. Don't just talk about it. Give me 2 more animal control officers. It costs about $30,000 a year. Get them on the street. That'll solve your problem. And if not, at least you got somebody out there. I can't really ask an officer who's calling me in response to a felony or a crime against an individual to take time out to go and check on a tether. Maybe I should. Don't get me wrong. But you've selected animal control as the mechanism to do this. And frankly, he can't do it. No one person could.
Mayor, can I ask one question? Mr. Sparks, right now our ordinance says it shall be unlawful for any person within the corporate limits of the city to beat, cruelly ill-treat, abuse, or torture any animal, whether his or her own or that of another. It seems to me that if you've got a dog like this, and the photographs are accurate, and I assume they are, that you could actually charge the person that owns that dog and is ill-treating that dog with a violation of that ordinance rather than the anti-tethering ordinance.
I wouldn't use either one, Mr. Solicitor. I'd use the state law because that appears to be cruel neglect by evidence of the spine, the lost weight, or the limited weight. I frankly wouldn't even look at the city code at that point. I would go to state law.
And of course, I would say cruelly ill-treat would fit within the same definition of the state law you just mentioned. But state law is probably,
It's just
a
broader.
safer way to do it.
And frankly, it's more powerful. I don't have to wait for the delay. It's a Class A misdemeanor straight up to a year and a $500 fine. It doesn't require the nuances of the many definitions in the city ordinance. Think of the state law as a bubble gum machine. You know how your bubble gum machine is just a big bowl or a tube or whatever full of gum? They fill it up with pieces of bubble gum, and in between those pieces of bubble gum are small gaps because they're round, so they can't fit together, correct? Every time you try to add another bubble gum, another law to fill up the problem, what do you end up doing? You create more little gaps in between the bubble gum things. I just go for the big honking piece of gum. I don't want to worry about how many little gaps somebody can throw at me or throw at the city or throw at Part I or throw at the city police who are out there trying to do their job as best they can every day. We've got tools to deal with this. If you create those certain elements of crimes differing from state law, all I'm saying is you just got to have somebody out there to be able to prove it up. And that's not so easy, you know, when you're knocking on somebody's house and they say, well, yeah, we brought the dog in last night. Well, I didn't feed him. Okay, so.
Mr. Stark, I personally called on this dog several times, and I actually went to the house with Mr. Pardai multiple times. And I went through dispatch, I followed all of the protocol as I was asked to do.
I'll remind everybody that Kentucky's one of a few states that allow individuals off the street to come in and fill out criminal complaints for purposes of prosecution. And if you did not feel satisfied with that, I'd have been more than happy for you
Here's
to
my,
come in and
but
take
I
a
haven't
charge.
finished my question yet, though. I'm just trying to figure out how the system that you say works. It would actually work in this situation, because I was trying to go through the protocol that we did have in place with the ordinance and with Mark and his supervisors and what they've asked us to do. So the first time we did our educational route, hey, here's some straw for your dog, want some knuckle bones,
Oh,
need some
yeah.
help with
Do you mind taking questions? 'Cause I
Oh,
don't wanna-
not at all. I don't want to delay. I mean,
No,
I
that's-
know Commissioner Henn was planning on staying here all night.
We put it on the agenda today for this discussion.
So, I mean, I thought that I had gone through all of the routes possible to go, because dispatch, I understand the need for that, it goes on record, it helps everybody involved. But as an animal control officer, Mark was very aware of this situation. So what you're saying is after I called the third or fourth time and we went together to this site, I should have come to your office and filled out a criminal report?
You could have, yes, ma'am.
Is that what I should have done? Is that what you're advising me to do?
I don't think he's, I
I'm
don't
really
want
careful
to do
not to say
cross-examination here.
should've.
I'm
saying
just wondering the
that would have
process.
been an option.
Because but then I guess big picture, when we look at time versus money, I guess we're trying to prevent those things from having to come to your desk. For a case like this, that might be able to be handled on a lower level.
Well, what I attempt to do for, again, good, bad, or indifferent, and that's part of the focus. If you focus on and I realize it's a preventative statute, but if you focus on the tethering question, you tend to exclude the other. If this case would have been brought to me by whomever, I wouldn't have called this a tethering case. It's not what it is. It's a neglect case. But you get all worked up with titles and thinking about this, that, and the other. I really wish I wish you'd get rid of the whole tethering ordinance tomorrow. Wouldn't hurt me, wouldn't hurt this community, except one thing: public awareness. It informs people what not to do before the situation gets bad. But there's so many exceptions and delays in it that situations, and I'm assuming all this is correct, there's sufficient proof and blah, blah, blah. We've never talked about tethering ordinance here at all, because I ain't going to let 7 more days go.
Well, I just was always of the mentality, I don't want to come right to your office if there are better avenues to go through to prevent that from happening.
You'd be surprised when I get done with a phone call in KRS. I mean, this little tiny city in one of the poorest states in the nation, you know, seriously, at least use the tools that you got, and I don't mind calling and yelling at people. And I want photographs and I want reports, but, and no, I did not mean no disrespect to the ordinance, et cetera. It does a good thing by stopping problems from occurring, but there are good tools available right now that we can utilize enforcement-wise. I guess my complaint is, I just think I know enforcers.
Well, that's what we want to ask you. We want, as a commission, to come up with an animal control ordinance that will work and that will hold up if it goes to court. And
This one will, there's nothing, wrong- in
to
my
protect-
mind, wrong with it. Taken in conjunction with other, within the statutory framework and the ordinal framework, there's nothing, in my mind, wrong with this per se. But as long as I just have one animal control officer operating in the incorporated areas of Frankfort, Kentucky.
You commissioners want to ask, Mr., because I don't want to keep him here.
Well, I just
Very
want to make
appreciative.
sure that I'm hearing what I think I'm hearing. You would rather prosecute this with under a state statute than an ordinance because it's much easier to do. And I thought I heard you say, get rid of this ordinance.
This ordinance is critical, in my mind, for one reason and one reason only. It prevents the problem. State criminals, thou shalt not murder. Now, that's a good idea. Generally speaking, been around for a while, don't kill somebody. But you know how to prosecute somebody for murder? They have to kill somebody first. There's no such thing really as attempted animal cruelty. So the ordinance that you've passed sends a good public message to people about, public service, don't do it. Here's a little bit of penalty, and if you do really bad, there's a big penalty. But in terms of prosecuting individuals for this, no, Madam Commissioner, I would never waste time with the city ordinance on this. I mean, and I say that respectfully, and I don't think there's anybody here in the room who'd want me to. And if you do, I'm sorry. I'll never waste time on a city ordinance for this. And if you want me to, I don't care. I'll never do a city ordinance. I will never do a city ordinance for this. This is a state law violation under KRS Chapter 500 animal cruelty, or 200 animal cruelty, period, bar none. And that's my point on that. There is a statutory framework that works, but when you get hooked up on only one aspect of it, you exclude other aspects. And I wanted the commission to realize that there were other tools, and you just don't take them in isolation. But give me another couple animal control officers, that'd be cool. And more cops too would be really, right, Chief?
Amen.
We had that conversation.
I just had that conversation, trying to get more.
So that's how we do it on the road.
Well, I don't know if you want to answer more questions. I mean, it's up to you, because I don't want to put you on this spot where people are going to throw questions at you that we could deal with.
I'm here at the pleasure of the mayor and the commission.
Would you consider prosecuting the ordinance in a case that you said that, followed the tethering criteria?
If I had proof and it prevented a problem, yes, ma'am.
Do you want to answer more?
Yeah. You're the parliamentarian.
Hey, we're glad to let you.
Take the
We're
heat
glad
out
that you're
there,
here. We don't get to have that a lot.
I don't have a question, I just have a couple of comments, if I may.
Well, let me ask if anybody else wanted to ask you more questions. Well, if the county attorney is willing to do it, and I think a lot of the problem is folks don't always understand why our procedures are the way they are and why the county attorney's procedures are the way they are, because of the rules that govern us and statutes that the county attorney has to follow. I think it's a good opportunity to say, hey, we would love to be able to tell people, don't do these things to your dogs. Some people it's a lack of education on their part. I've changed a lot of views I've had dogs when I was younger, but then my son has a dog now, and taking all this into consideration, understanding I wouldn't want his dog to be tethered by somebody if it was owned by somebody. I know that dog now, so he wouldn't like that. So you want to ask a question? I'm sorry, ma'am.
I don't really have a question as much as maybe just making a statement. It's good to know that our resources are being, considered in this whole process, because I think what ends up happening, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the chief of police last name, Will Hoyer. I think it's very difficult for him. I think it's very difficult for the prosecutor if there's not enough evidence. And to me, I'm a bleeding heart. But there's something to be said about the safety, too, of these animals that are chained and what the statistics are on those animals. And to tie it back to the wording that's in the tethering law, I was here at that meeting as well, and I do know, with all due respect with attorneys, the words get broken down individually and they can mean something else. But I do think a reasonable person that would sit on a jury would read direct control and supervision for something other than being inside a house and looking out the window. If we're talking about a dog that's chained, that's mean and vicious, I mean, let's put this into terms that's real to all of us. Most of the animals that we know.
Oh, you know, you might not be coming across on the, you might not have your comments recorded. Well, it's these microphones, it's the little flat microphones that we're recording with, it's not these.
I'm glad to share me.
Oh, we are recording, okay.
You could get your name too, I'm sorry.
So do it.
Michelle Kent. I think that what we need to consider here too is most of the animals that we know that are chained, not all of them are neglected and abused. We've got the safety factor with the resource involved. I'm a bleeding heart. I'm into rescuing animals that are on those chains. But there's the safety factor when we talked about direct control. And I do think a reasonable person on a jury would not say you can be inside your house washing dishes, because if this animal is vicious, if it would attack, and most of them are not socialized, I don't think that most of us would have a friend that would have an animal on a chain. Most of them are being used as an alarm if someone's on your property. And in those cases, the ones that are the alarm are the ones that might bite. And are they under your direct control and supervision if they come off that chain? Can you grab it quickly? Can you get it under your control quickly if you're inside your home? It's very difficult, I would think, in my opinion, for Mark Pardai to go to someone's house unless he knows how to interpret direct control, because we need some hardcore evidence to show evidence inside of a house. Yeah, what window were they looking out of? Or Chief Wilhoit, how can their folks, the police officers, go out and know, okay, well, direct control is within 10 feet, and they were looking out their window. Does he need to snap a picture?
That's what he does.
Yeah, if he can.
I mean, that's what
If he
Mr. Carter
can.
does.
If we see the blinds are pulled, well, we didn't see them peeking out, so they weren't under direct control. I just wanted to say that I think I understand, to me, that it's all about, more than anything, the interpretation of how it's written. And I do think there's a whole legal aspect of it, but I think a reasonable person, it would be a given of direct control being something other than being inside the house. It's being able to grab that animal if it gets out of your control. But I know it goes back also to, I didn't know that you could walk your dog and not have them on a leash, so.
All right.
If that's considered control. That's all I have.
Does anybody else have any questions while we have the,
I took those pictures because I had permission by the owners to go on the property. So if I were to, take this case into you as a criminal case, I was fortunate enough that they allowed me on the property, but in a lot of those situations, the owners are quite hostile, and it would be hard to collect evidence to do that. So what would you suggest that I should do in a situation if they had not let me on that property?
At that point, to avoid you becoming, breaking actually the same level law as you're accusing that they've broken, I would refer it to the police for enforcement, because if they needed that, then they could get a search warrant, or animal control has certain authority to cross that property.
And so but now, in this, I'm just talking about this situation, I was directly involved in it. Mark was involved, and then it was a situation after he was off duty, and I did contact the police officer. In this situation.
If there requires an investigation, as I said, Kentucky's one of only a few states that allow direct charges. There are some cases that I've just drawn the line, for example, child abuse, neglect, sexual abuse cases. They were going to require investigations by competent legal personnel. You don't have the authority to cross on somebody's property to conduct investigations. You will get charged and shot. So I try to avoid advising people to do such a
Right,
thing.
and we don't go on property.
So then it
Unless
starts
we're
over
invited.
again. So that's why I think but if you got enough proof, I mean, heck, if you got
So
enough proof.
with the police officer being dispatched to that location, and then our complaints, then I can still file with you?
oh yeah, we're going too back, we're doing two conversations. I was trying to be relaxed, but we're getting maybe way too relaxed. That's okay.
I contribute to that one.
I'm just trying to figure out how the process would work in that end.
And it sounds like maybe stuff that folks may want to come to your office.
Well, then that
No, because we're getting, folks have no idea.
I've got 9 o'clock, please, don't look at me.
I'll give them your
Maybe
email.
about 4:30. I just wanted to make sure that the commission understood, though, and it is frustrating, and I think you've got a lot of people here who are bringing up society is judged by how we treat our animals and our kids. And by improving the treatment of both, then we improve ourselves. But the road to hell is paved with best intentions. And when you try to tweak it, just be aware of what you're going to get. And
Are you
that's why
saying we're in hell? Is that what you're saying?
well, it sounds like my day's going to be hell tomorrow, but so far so good today. But my point is that if you do it and you're really serious and you want to get rid of tethering, here's how to do it. Say, thou shalt not tether. You should be within 10 feet of immediate control. Your eyes are on it all the time. Say what you mean. I think that the law that you have right now represents a balanced approach for control as well as supervision of animals. Combined with state law, there's enough remedy to stop that. I might get rid of the 7-day notice thing, but on the other hand, that makes a lot of really non-criminal type people criminals if you shorten it out. But just be aware that when you do this, you still have to have proof. You still have to have eyes on the road. I've still got to have officers, investigators, etc. to prove it up. The best statute in the world is worthless without sufficient proof. With that, I stand.
Thank you for coming, and I really appreciate you being willing to answer questions from folks. And we're being way more relaxed in our rules because of trying to figure out how to address animal issues.
Well, I know Mr. Moore and I've worked very closely and talked about the interpretation of all these and how to fit them into the criminal justice system. And we'll continue to be doing so tomorrow.
And if people want to take out charges at the county attorney's office, all they need to do is come by your office on Main Street, get the proper...
It's actually on St. Clair.
Is it on St. Clair?
Security. Yeah.
Oh, you moved, okay.
Yeah.
Can we
Sorry.
get their criminal reports offline to fill out before we get there to save you time?
It is on the county website. I think they've got those loaded up if they haven't. I'll make sure tomorrow that one of somebody's staff got them.
Thank you.
Please feel free to contact the judge's executive's office on any of your further needs.
Well, that's where we're supposed to go through, right? 875-8751?
Yeah, that's what it is. The mayor's office. Please
But also, just remember too, yeah, you call my office, I don't care. When people file charges with the county attorney, you have to put your name on there. Whereas if you go through our dispatch center and go through the police office, the officer is going to be on there, so you may understand that's a public document.
You have to swear the warrant.
So you have to swear it. It's the same as swearing out like a...
But I'll tell you this, and not, I will stop, Mr. Mayor's Commission, I will go home and not say another word. If you're going to do it, you're going to be held to the same standards of proof as a cop's got. If you come in with half-baked proof, I'm not going to take a half-baked charge. I don't care how good the intention is. If I can't prove it and I'm on mine and I'm a cheap date, I ain't going to be filing it for you for somebody else.
But if I couldn't prove it directly and I relied on the police officer,
Then I
that was
have
my
to refer
question.
to the police.
Okay.
But if you come in and yell at me, well, I didn't take a charge, I go, well, you didn't accuse nobody of nothing.
Okay,
You ain't
has
got
to be
no
on
proof.
record.
You know, I mean, I got to have something. And you're going to stand beside me and swear it too.
I have a question for Rick.
If he wants to answer.
Can you answer my question?
I
Okay,
don't know what
the
it is yet,
dogs,
probably
the
not,
dogs
but I
on
believe it.
Rouse Avenue from, back in January that were
Yes.
tied up in the cold, nobody even lives on that property, and there's still, to this day, a dog tied there.
Then I would suggest that
nothing
that ought to
has-
be going through
And we
dispatch and
have lots of
investigation, so
pictures, we've
somebody
sent
can figure it
them,
out.
they won't even go over there.
Well, I heard the chief not wanting to
Okay.
get into particulars here. That might be more appropriate for discussions with the
Okay.
chief to do that.
So if you guys would just let us know the right way to do it in
Right,
this moment.
we're not trying to be a pain in the butt.
So we're trying to figure out.
We're really not.
We just would like to know the process that you guys
Yeah.
do it.
And maybe, again, that may be a thing that instead of coming, you're always welcome to come to our commission meetings, but it may be better to have this other, I think some of us talked about that, and actually I've had private meetings with some of you all before. We just do that in a discussion level.
Again, my intent was just to let you know how it's being interpreted.
No, we
along
appreciate it.
with
I'm
the
glad you came.
statutory framework.
I always am happy to have you come over.
It's my pleasure. Maybe excused.
Well, you're always free to go.
Thank you.
You're the prosecutor.
Enjoy your night.
You know that.
See you tomorrow on jury duty.
See you.
Okay, now getting back, and of course, there's other folks that want to talk about other things other than the tethering part of this. We've got folks that want to talk about other animals issues. Ms. Sloan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment.
And don't, even though I didn't, just state your name for the clerk if you don't mind.
Janine Sloan. After hearing Mr. Sparks, and apparently there's a problem with terminology, there's a problem with enforcement. I'd like to propose you consider banning chaining altogether. That's
one big piece of gum he's talking about. There's no cracks in it.
That's what we tried to do 4 years ago, but we didn't have.
Just please consider that, because it's proven that for 3 years this worked. We didn't need more money. We didn't need more animal control officers. I'm involved with the Humane Society. It did not cause more animals to come into the shelter. It worked, just as it's written. If you don't want to ban it, which would be a very easy, simply enforced, I wouldn't put a foot restriction on it. I would say just physically be accompanying that dog. And I got that suggestion from Lieutenant Sutton when I met with him. You can fine these people. You know, we can bring money into the city. Give them time to correct it. Give them resources like SOAR. But with SOAR excluded, we have a law on the books, and it really pains me that our authorities are not enforcing it. You know, I'm a citizen, and, you know, I vote, and I support this. And to just blatantly be looked in the face and say, it doesn't matter, even though it's right here in black and white, we don't have to. I mean, that tells me Frankfort is not what it could be, and I don't understand that. Another concern is this dog right here. The right process went through. Animal control was there. Rick Sparks stood right here and said that dog's neglected. Mark Pardide did not. He's our animal control officer. You know,
Police officer, he went there.
well, Mark Pardide was there and even took pictures. So I'll speak to Chief Wilhoit to please really see that Mark is good at doing what he does, but his hands have been tied, and now his mind has been skewed to where he is not living by the word of the ordinance, and he's not seeing things the way he used to. If Rick says that dog's neglect, why didn't Mark see that? And if it's because he did see it and he went back to Lieutenant Sutton or Abrams and said, I have this case, and they said, oh, it's an animal, don't worry about it, then we have another problem. I'm not trying to blame the police or Mark or any commission or anyone, but it boils down to we have a problem, and it is a public health and safety concern with these dogs that become vicious. Rick Sparks said that this ordinance is good now if it's used to prevent it in the future. The dog that Barbara Murray talked about moved in a week ago. It didn't prevent it. So there again, that discounts what he said. We're not all on the same page. When I talked to Lieutenant Sutton, pretty much he didn't understand what attending meant. So we looked at E, and it tells you what attending is, and he says it's still open to interpretation because it doesn't say you're physically there. You know, we can add that word if that's what Lieutenant Sutton wants, but what about when there's another turnover of supervision for our animal control officer? How are they going to read it? So let's write it a way that it can't be misinterpreted. And how do you do that? Let's just ban it. Just ban chaining. That way Mark knows this is being enforced. And, you know, just hearing Mr. Sparks speak, it just shows that we don't have the buy-in of authorities for animals here in the county, in the city, period. And it pains me because he's right. I mean, a murder or child molestation or something is going to trump that. But it doesn't mean we turn a blind eye to it all the time. I mean, it's on our books. Time, effort, and money was put into this ordinance. It doesn't take more money to enforce it because it's already been done. And people are here to help like SOAR. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay, go ahead, Susie.
Cece Mitchell, and I'd just like to make one comment. It seems to me if you're not opposed to dogs being chained, then you support it, you're for it. So if you sitting commissioners are for dogs being chained, that's what I'll be finding out. So I support it, and I support more enforcement because I too am a bleeding heart. Thank you.
Thank you. There's anybody else that hasn't spoken yet? again, I'm being really relaxed with this, so.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, because the commission wants, they want to hear that from you too, so. Okay, then I'll just come back to you, Ms. Miller, one more time before we move on.
Just want to make one more point. Mr. Sparks stated that we have a good state law in place that would cover all this, and that is absolutely not true. Our state law stinks, and it is full of the word adequate over and over and over, and we all know that that word can be debated big time. My adequate and your adequate is probably two different things, so we do not want to use that law, and I can bring everybody a copy of it. I do have a copy. I should have brought one. But if that were true, if that law was so good, Kentucky wouldn't have been rated the worst state in the nation for 7 years running now. I mean, we've been voted that #1 state in the nation for animal abuse now 7 years running. And it's not because we have a good state law. Our laws stink. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I know we haven't completely solved all this yet, and it's going to take some more discussion. And I know the commission, I don't mean to speak for here, but I don't think any of them are for animal abuse or neglect in any way as our staff that I've ever seen when I've talked with them. I'm sorry to hear some of the issues that have had to come forward and some of the perceptions that some people may have that officers don't. At least ones I've looked into, I've always felt like I've gotten honest answers and that our folks have been keenly aware of trying to help animals while also maintaining the respect of owners, property owners, and owners of animals. And again, as you heard, I mean, I don't consider a dog or a cat anything other than a part of somebody's family, but under the law, there's going to be property rights, and for officers to be able to walk onto somebody's property, whether it be an animal control officer or a sworn police officer, then they've got to have some things that they can get prosecuted at the higher level. And also, the laws that we write have to be something that they can interpret easily and be enforceable. So, I know people can talk to the county attorney to get some information. Again, some folks are going to talk with the police chief. Continue to call any one of us. We're all happy to meet, and those of you that have had an opportunity to meet with, thank you for that input. These are the hardest laws to try to write because there's so many folks that own, some of the folks, and we haven't even heard from dog owners that will come in, and as those of you that have been in this issue before, once this starts to move forward, then there will be opportunities for folks to come in to speak against any type of stricter animal control laws, because some folks feel like, hey, it's their animal, they should be able to, I hate to use the word mistreated, because I don't think, some people just don't understand what that does to an animal to be tied up and how detrimental that is to be even a small caged area or fenced area can be to a dog. That's their territory, and they're going to act differently when you walk into that area. So there'll be owners of dogs that some people say we should ban certain breed. I'm not even going to say the breed because I'll get all the phone calls, but some people will have asked that we ban certain breeds, especially in light of this recent dog attack. But I know one of the dogs, it's a German Shepherd, a white German Shepherd. So it's like, again, you start trying to ban breeds, then where do you end? And we've been that road before, but there are some that I've gotten several calls from people that would like us to do that. I don't know if commissioners have, but Ms. Mitchell.
Here's an idea. Penalize the people that chain their animals out. They have to stay out on the chain themselves for every hour that their animals are in.
I like that.
That could be the penalty.
Well, I don't know if the court would do, we could always ask them, let that be one of the prosecution tools.
Well, it might be a good deterrent, though.
We would take care of that for you.
Okay, but, so, thanks for your input tonight. We're going to have to continue talking because we don't have, this is not,
So what's our next step, Mayor?
Well, I think after some of you talk with the police chief and the county attorney, you can let us know where you are on that. We've talked before about having a big community-wide meeting of everybody talking about animal control issues, but believe me, having done this, I was here when we wrote the first law in '92. We tweaked it again years later when we did the tethering ordinance. I'm personally involved in all of those and the difficulty in that.
So after we meet with the appointed people, then we contact you all, maybe set up a meeting just with the commission? Is that what you suggest?
Well, if we get to a point where we can get something that, if there are things that need to be changed, you may, after having those meetings, feel like, you know what, if we do change this about leaving dogs outside, not that you should, but if someone has concerns about that section, which I know we have, I've met with several people on that back in February, March, you may look at it and it's like, you know what, we're better off leaving it where we are and trying to let the prosecutors figure out ways to prosecute this rather than under the tethering ordinance, under animal cruelty, neglect.
Mayor, if I may, perhaps the way forward is, is, as he said, let's have that meeting. Let's see, as you say, what has changed, and see if we can get back to the beginning of this ordinance where you felt like it was being, that folks were in compliance with it. And if it's not, then we can come back, or you can come back and request that certain language or verbiage get changed or whatever. But just kind of let's say get all the principals together, we'll meet, monitor it, and in that way, then we can determine the best course of action. If our hands are completely tied and we can't do anything with it, then it would be time to change the wording of the law. But if it was working before, as you say, then let's see if we can get it back.
Thank you.
Okay?
Question.
Sure.
What about the dogs that are living like this in the meantime? Can we get Mark out there to start enforcing this?
Give me the list of addresses. I'll have him.
All right.
Actually, I saw his truck parked out back, so he may be on vacation this week, but I can have police officers check on him. Okay.
Oh, we don't say. I was just like, well, I don't.
If you'll just you have my office number, my cell number. If you give me the addresses, give me the addresses, and I'll have officers check. Okay.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks for your willingness, Chief. Okay. Thank you all, and we'll just. Thanks for putting your time in on it.
One of the restaurant says it's going to take.
You want to take
them
a 2-minute break?
Yes, this is going to take them a while.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Bowers for a 5-minute recess, second by Commissioner Haynes. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. 5-minute recess.
Management firm in the U.S. Standard was second largest. We got together now, and everything is groovy now. A year ago, I came up and I talked about the garage and how we were struggling, how it wasn't quite breaking even. I said, hey, can we do a $2 increase? We did it. We're projecting to make $5,000 this year. So it's one of those, hey, this worked. Now there are always little things that may come up. Derby weekend, I don't know if you heard about it, Chief, but we had a little bit of vandalism over at the garage.
Yes.
The elevator was actually broken by the vandals. It turned out to just be a fairly simple fix. Elevator technician came out, helped clean out the door. He and I were here on Derby afternoon, prying the doors open, making sure everything was working properly. What I was afraid might be a $3,000 or $4,000 fix turned out to be about $300 or $400. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Obviously, though, vandalism can happen at any point. The equipment. This is some of the oldest parking equipment I operate in the entire central Kentucky area. It was put in brand new when the garage was built in the 80s. Effective lifetime of parking equipment is 10 to 15 years. So if you give the ticket dispensers, I actually received a letter from the manufacturer last year saying that they would no longer support repairs and refurbishment of the equipment. So if they could fix it, they could fix it, but if they needed parts, we were out of luck. So some of those kinds of things happen no matter what we try, no matter how hard we work. So that 5,000 that we're looking at maybe being trend, and by the way, that 5,000 is on the calendar year. So I'm only January, February, March, April into seeing where we are. Something may fluctuate between now and then. Any number of things can change that. But again, the $2 increase seemed to work. We're headed in the right direction with it. And I want to talk a little bit more about long-term concerns, things that can come up over the life of a garage. For instance, in 2009, the city sunk about $250,000 into repairing and refurbishing the parking garage at Sullivan so that we didn't get St. Clair Part 2, where people were afraid to go in, where it needed all kinds of renovations, and we eventually had to close it down because people couldn't use it. That $250,000 fixed up everything that was wrong, added some really nice awnings over the elevators to try to keep those from getting worse, over the stairwells to keep those from getting worse. But unfortunately, that's one of those ongoing things. Somewhere down the road, and I'm not a structural engineer, so I'm not going to tell you when or where. I don't know those things. But somewhere down the road, there will be a need for more structural repairs. Whether they're less the next time, more the next time, I just don't know. Other things that have happened, while the elevator tech was here with me a couple weekends ago looking at things, he was pointing out some issues with the elevator that, because it's an older elevator, it's within the code and the guidelines of how to safely operate an elevator. But there are certain pieces that just you don't use anymore for safety reasons. It would be good to do an elevator modernization. That elevator was actually damaged not in the last flood, but the flood before. So if that kind of gives you an idea of how long that's been there. It's been 20 years that that elevator's been up and operational. We're going through an elevator modernization at one of our garages in Frankfort for 2 cabs. It's about $350,000. If that gives you an idea of 1 cab, why I came up with a $200,000 price range for that. Park equipment, that's your parking and revenue control equipment. Like I said, it's from the 80s. Be nice to upgrade it at some point. I go through and listen to equipment proposals all the time. Currently, I can get it a little cheaper than $180, but $180 is typically about the price point that I get quoted for new park equipment for the Sullivan Square garage. Wage increases, somewhere down the road, I know the state of Kentucky is looking at the minimum wage rate, talking about taking it to $10.10 an hour. Currently, your 2 booth attendants who are part-time attendants make about $7.50, $8 an hour. So when you add in workers' comp, when you add in payroll taxes, when you add in all the little things that go with it, if those 2 attendants are still sitting here at the point that it goes to $10.10 an hour, you're looking at a $9,000 annual cost for payroll and associated benefits for those 2 employees. Lighting improvement. The lighting that is in there currently is, not to bore you guys, my staff accuses me all the time of being really, really into lighting. But the lighting that's in there is what's called a high-pressure sodium bulb. It's one of the oldest bulbs that's out on the market in use. I don't know if anybody remembers the mercury vapors, but those were eventually outlawed. You can't put those in anymore. Well, HPS are the next thing to be pushed away and done away with. So that kind of gives you an idea of where they are. One of the things with HPS lighting is it's yellow light instead of the white light that's in this room. It puts out more lumens, but your eyes can't process them as well. So you can actually switch over to induction, LED, fluorescent, any kind of lighting other than a yellow light and get more usable light and use less energy. So if, for instance, we could go in and do a $90,000 improvement on the lighting at some point, switch over to a white light source and go from spending $1,000 to $1,200 per month on utilities to $500 to $600 per month on utilities, cutting your effective cost by $6,000 a year. It's a 10-year improvement, but, well, 15. I mean, it's a long-term improvement. You won't see that savings very quickly, but somewhere down the road you would. Some of the other things that have come along, pressure washing used to be done every year, then every other year religiously to get the salt out of the garage. It extends the life of the concrete. One of the problems we've had is that the EPA, because of the garage, all the storm sewers in the garage run straight into the river. EPA guidelines are harsher now than they used to be. So a pressure washing used to cost $1,200 to $2,000 annually. All of that water has to be captured now. It can't go back into the river. Because it can't go back into the river, you're looking at an $8,000+ job to have it pressure washed. These are just some of the ongoing costs that come up long-term over the life of a garage that change dramatically over a year, that we really kind of look at it and go, we try to budget as best we can. Tim, Steve, and myself have been working on this. That's why we came up with the $2 a month increase for our monthly parkers. It worked beautifully. It did exactly what it's supposed to. I tried to forecast out there. The first column there shows if we do nothing, we went from $21 in 2012, 2013 to $23 now per month that we're charging. And for the first 2 or 3 years, we're going to stay right around a break even. We're showing a $5,000 profit trending this year. We're losing $5,000 next year. Well, it's a nice zero gain over 2 years, then losing another $1,000 a year after before it really starts impacting us in 2017. I've also drawn out a $1, a $2, and a $3 increase. Those are your next 3 columns. And you can see by going $1, $2, or $3, you can start building a maintenance reserve fund, which is something we always encourage our ownerships to do because of these ongoing costs. We like to see $25,000 at least being sunk into a maintenance reserve fund. Some places can't do that. Some places won't do that. It just helps offset these kinds of costs that come up down the road. How to get there, a $2, $3 increase, I would recommend it too. Just an annual, every year $2 increase. To give you all a little perspective on where a $2 increase gets you in comparison to your market, the Sullivan Square garage is currently at $23. St. Clair, which is now a private garage, is $45 to $50 a month. So even over the next 10 years, you're not going to catch up to St. Clair. To push out a little further, the city of Danville has a parking garage built in 2008. By bond, it has to increase by $1 a year over the life of the bond, at which point it turns over to a CPI increase. It's currently $47 or $48 per month. So there's a little more perspective. City of Danville, City of Frankfort, City of Lexington, of course, little different story. You're looking at $55 to $75, even $80 a month for parking inside of a covered garage. City of Louisville's more like $80 to $100, $120, and I wouldn't by any means recommend trying to catch up to those guys. It's a totally different market, totally different situation. But just with little tweaks, you can do some things to set aside some money for a rainy day so that we're not coming to the city and saying, oh, hey, we need to do X, and it's going to cost this many hundreds of thousands, and then the city's looking at the general fund trying to figure out where to borrow the money, how to pull it out so that it doesn't impact other things that we've been talking about tonight, programs that are needing of money, such as police, such as animal control, those kinds of things. So I'm not going to tell you guys you have to do an increase. It's not as bad as it was last year where I was saying, please, 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 let's do this, let's catch up to break even. But if you want to get ahead and stay ahead, that's where I would look at going, is just a small tweak. And it's just on an annual basis, not any kind of semi-annual or huge number. So.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Steffen. Any commissioners have any questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Like I said, I'll try to keep it short.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So what do we need to do?
He was talking about having a $25,000 per year minimum on maintenance. If we did a $2 increase, we did a $2 increase, and we had a profit this past year. And then he was suggesting, or we could do another increase.
What do we need to do the increase?
It's up to us. I mean, he's saying right now, if we don't do an increase, we're at least in decent shape. Is Mr. Steffen still here?
Why don't we go with $1 the first time and see what happens with that?
The dollar is shown.
It's like this.
Gotcha.
I'm saying, why don't we opt for $1 a year increase to start off?
I think he just brought it for information tonight. Because
I mean, that's what they're wanting us to implement that, though.
They would be proposing for 2015, January of 2015.
Yeah,
Okay.
down Calvin.
I'd go with the flat 25.
You go with what? Flat 20.
Which would be the $2 increase.
We can bring this back at a later date. We wanted to keep the commission informed as to the financial condition of the Sullivan Garage. We can bring this back this fall with a staff recommendation.
Any other, say, next 3 items? I know Commissioner Hedden had asked that we consider letting those presentations be sent to us electronically or in paper form, if you prefer it in paper form,
For these 3 items?
for the 3-year street and sidewalk plan, fire department 20-year vehicle replacement plan, and the overflow garbage.
So we're not going to deal with those tonight?
Well, we can.
Well, we can if you want to.
I'm just asking.
She was just asking if it was necessary, if we could get the information
That's
electronically.
fine, but I want mine,
Then we can.
but I would
come
like a
back.
paper copy, please.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because some people might want a paper.
Okay.
Then we would, I'm sorry, do you want to do the,
I do.
do you want to talk about it?
Well, I'm fine with those 2 electronically on my end.
Which 2?
The 3-year street, which y'all said, and the sidewalk and fire department 20-year vehicle. And then if somebody wants a hard copy, I'm fine. I think I brought overflow garbage up. I think the same it wasn't just, I put it on here, but I think everybody was fine with that. I think we had that concern brought at the meeting, and I asked if we could just talk about it. And of course, the concern is the obvious one that we've heard all the time, which is I do my job, I put my garbage out, I take my garbage cans in, but Tom Smith over here, he just throws his stuff out there. He puts his cans there 2 or 3 days before. He doesn't use his cans, and the garbage is strewn all over the neighborhood, and I'm tired of it. And so I think, and that person, I believe, was a landlord who felt like they had done a really good job, but that the landlords around them, and they had pictures and that kind of thing. Y'all remember. So I guess the question is, and I don't have a very good answer, but hopefully people got better ones, is what do we continue to get this problem, and you can't solve every problem, but what are the best solutions to this type of issue?
Besides picking it up, and we can't collect on any fine, much less if they're a property owner who lives out of state.
Yeah, they're having trouble collecting on the fine. I think that's another aspect of the problem. Landlord may be out of state, or landlord may just not paying attention to it, or the landlord may feel like the tenants are the problem, and there's a variety of issues. But I guess I'd like to know what we typically do, which I think we've been told before, and then what are some options to try to improve it. And maybe it's not that big of a problem anyway. This might be an isolated incident.
All right, well, Mr. Tom Bradley, our Public Works Director, I guess will address that.
According to the ordinance, when solid waste is put out not in accordance to the ordinance, we tag it, and they've got 5 days to clean it up. If they don't clean it up within that 5 days, we come by, we pick it up, we bill the property owner the $25. We don't know if the owner's out of state. I don't know that we could make that difference even if we did know.
How often is this happening?
Do we tag people for this? I didn't bring the numbers with me. We tag people every day for something, whether it's a bag outside of the can that's not an overflow bag, or something that's in the trash or the recycling that's something we can't take. There's tags put on different cans every day. I can bring the numbers next time, or email them to you, how many tags we're writing.
Oh, may I tag on to that, Commissioners? How
Tag
many,
onto that.
tag on to that? How many of them are repeat offenders as well, I guess, that have gotten multiple tags?
We
or
can tell
multiple
that too.
citations?
That'd be great.
We'll put a report together on that.
And then adding to Commissioner Hedden, since I'll avoid the pun, is what we know what we get back in garbage fees, 68.4% in 2013. What percentage pay this?
Well, the majority of people take care of it within the 5 days.
And then if they don't, we send them a bill, and if they don't pay.
That's the one I'm asking.
We
Yes, sir.
eventually send it to Mr. Moore's office for a lien. So I'll include that in the report as well.
Do you have any suggestions besides just keep doing what we're doing?
Do you want to put that in the report
And
as
try
well?
not to laugh? I'm with you, I understand.
You know, we've talked about different things, you know, with repeat offenders. We can't very well, I don't think, it was made clear by the last commission that they didn't want us to cut off service to anyone.
Well, I might be fine with that.
And, but, you know, we've talked about if, for instance, if someone doesn't pay their bill, if they've got a 64-gallon cart and they refuse to pay for that cart, maybe we should just switch it out to the free cart. That's a possibility, so that they're not getting the service without paying for it that someone else who is getting the service and is paying for it gets. But as far as repeat offenders, the ordinance doesn't give us a lot to do on that. Yes, sir.
Mayor? Oh, you want to say that? Go ahead.
Under section 50.99B, we've got a couple of options under the ordinance. One is to cite them as Mr. Bradley's just described, but another way to address it is you can issue a citation returnable to the Code Enforcement Board with which would have a civil penalty of not less than $50 nor more than $500 assessed for each violation. So you can actually issue a citation to the Code Enforcement Board. Now, we may have to tweak this language to refer to the nuisance board, but that certainly is an option. And that's, you have more monetary penalty than you do with the $25 under the other provision. And we have not used this enforcement mechanism since the new garbage regime has come into being.
Regime.
I'm not laughing.
Is there any way that we could do something that's more of a personal contact, like a human-to-human message? Is there any way, is it so problematic that we can't do that? Because I think people...
Educate them.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, yeah, but even just a more one-on-one, people, I think, respond better to that than a piece of paper hanging that's not very personal. And I don't know if it's even possible, if there's so many of them, that it would take a lot of human time. But I think you'd get a better result than tagging and then billing and then having to take it to some court process. I think people respond better, and I don't mean like a bang on the door and you're in violation, but, you know, I just wanted to remind you that if you could be more considerate about it, it would save us, you know what I'm saying? Is that even possible, or is that just too cumbersome?
We can attempt that when we know the
When you know who the...
exact, the repeat offenders, I think.
Well, if they're home.
In most of the
Yeah.
cases, you know, we're talking to the landlords,
Yeah.
and it's a tenant, you know, situation, and that throws a wrinkle into it as well.
Yeah. Or, and I don't know if we have ways to contact them through the phone or whatever, but, and I realize it's probably a lot of man hours, but I think it might get a better, go ahead.
No, Mr. Myers, I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying. I think ultimately we've got this dilemma that I don't have a very good answer for, and that is, let's say you're renting to 6 people, and Steve Smith and Tom Smith are repeat offenders week after week. You've worked with them, et cetera. As a landlord, you can't seem to get anything done, or you're out in California, and we don't ever penalize the person that's actually doing it, the tenant, because we figure that you're even less likely to get paid from the tenant. But they're probably, on the front line, you're more likely to get compliance on what you're trying to do by working with them. But I don't have a very good answer as to how to make all that work. But they're the ones that you're really needing to deal with.
Right.
There's times in my neighborhood where I've just made a copy of the ordinance, highlighted the points, and just slid it in someone's door who, on trash day, that you just see it's not right and just try to educate them. And if they're not home, I just leave it there. But that's all I can do, but.
And I actually do look forward to you sending that information because I'll be more knowledgeable when you have the numbers. Because the one lady that gave the presentation, hers was a specific thing.
Yes.
The owner did not live in town. And the tenants were the ones that put the couches and all this stuff out there and they sit. And that's a totally different thing than some of the stuff that sound like, you were talking about.
Well, a couch is a bulk item which we would pick up anyway.
Even if, how would you know? They left in the middle of the night.
If it's a couch out there, we would pick it up because it's a bulk item.
Okay, that's the picture she had.
Yeah. I didn't see the picture.
Yeah, she was, I know what she
I don't know if it was
is.
an address that we normally serve either. That's another problem. You do? Okay.
Chanel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would it be helpful for Mr. Bradley to provide you all with the percentage of issues? Because if you've got 30 citations that are unpaid over an entire year, and you've got 12,000 customers, I mean, that's 1% of 1%. I mean,
Yeah, it's nothing.
It's just negligible. So,
I think that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
While I'm here, I've got this printout for the, can I just go ahead and hand it to y'all? This is on the resurfacing. This is the 3-year plan that, that Derek and I worked on. It's not set in stone, but it's a good idea of what we plan on doing. I'm sure streets will be moved one to the other, or some may be added in for reasons we don't know. But it is a 3-year plan on the resurfacing and then the sidewalks as well. It's just something for you to look at. We need to take the list for the next year. We have to have a public hearing before we can actually start doing them. And so if you all have any input on the 2014, maybe by next work session, if you could just, route it to me. Yes, ma'am.
Are you getting any input from that public meeting that they had with the, with the side, the pedestrian?
Pedestrian thing.
Yeah. The, on the sidewalk meeting that I attended, they set up a survey,
Yeah,
and I've not seen the results of that survey.
okay,
That survey is, the way I understand it, is for new sidewalks
yes.
in town. And so, as we've talked before, the previous commission had instructed us to, work on Shinkle Lane, and phase 2 of that's under design right now. And then we're also looking at something at Stephen Road to kind of improve that little section.
From the school?
Well, yeah, from the school up into the existing sidewalk, there's a stretch there that doesn't,
Yes.
and it's heavily traveled. So those two things are things that the commission asked us to look at. It's outside of the normal sidewalk policy, which we try to follow.
Right.
Which is to fix the trip hazards first. But if you guys instruct us to go do something else, then that's what we do. So, but both of those things should happen this year.
Make a path connecting everything. Just kidding. Not really.
Make money.
Right, thank you.
They got that survey online. I'll forward it on to you.
Thank you.
I need one.
All right, well, thank you. Next item will be does anybody have anything on the tentative agenda for the 19th? Did you say you had some question about?
No, I was just saying agenda.
Oh, okay.
I haven't looked at it.
I had one concern. I didn't know if we were going to put item 4.3. I didn't know that we were going to have that on the agenda. Was that supposed to come back up? Does anyone remember?
Wow.
I was just saying on the tentative agenda 4.3. Did we say we were going to put it back on this work session?
I wanted it on there.
Okay.
I don't know if there's other commissioners.
That's okay, I just wanted, I didn't know how I didn't know if we had any, the 9%
I'm fine with that.
has had some. I just wanted to say too, just when, in times when we're cutting positions, and then when we give someone else a larger increase, my experience has been not positive from the rest of the staff. It's sort of a morale problem, and then I know it was brought up to me that the public information officer in the police department does a duty assignment, doesn't get extra money.
I didn't know it was coming up on this one, and I just, read that it wasn't 9% increase. I wouldn't have known that at the previous one. So I didn't know it was going to be on the vote at the voting meeting.
I mean, it's okay if there's support. I mean, I just can't support it at this time because of when we're doing other cuts. I mean, the question is, is there 3 people that want to keep it on the agenda?
I want to keep it on.
I do too.
Okay, so that's all I was trying to find out.
Is there not a third?
And you can always change your mind later. If you want to add something back on, we'll always do that. If someone changes their mind after tonight. Okay, well, if there's another-
And what's that included in the budget that is already proposed?
This is adding the public information officer
The dollar.
position to the grants manager,
I know what it is, the dollar amount.
about between 5,000 and 6,000.
His question is, was it in the budget proposed?
Yes, it is in the budget.
Mayor, you don't have a problem with the extra responsibility, but with the dollar amount attached to it?
I just have concerns because of the grant position. We've always, just the amount of time it takes for that position. Over the years, I've had concerns about, we've even talked about at one point hiring more people or more people doing grants, and I just preferred focusing on the grants part of it. And just my concern too is from some employees have contacted me, just really, again, not against the person, but just the concept at this point. Yeah, well, it is a special meeting. I said, you know what, if you don't want to decide tonight, you could do it, but since May 19th is a special meeting. Or you know what, if somebody called and said, one on the agenda, we can put it on the agenda if you want to think about it. I'm not trying to push a decision out if you don't want to.
Well, actually, we are doing that. You're cutting her legs out from under her. I mean, that's a fact of the matter. So, obviously, based on the discussion we just had, I mean, and I understand what you're saying, Mayor. Let me just say real quick that I think these ideas are a good idea, despite losing positions by attrition, because what it does is it gives flexibility to the city manager to reward people for doing additional things, as we did as we've done on a couple of other occasions the last year and a half. And so it gives him that flexibility to build a stronger team and a stronger culture. Just like if you have people that aren't performing as well, you can take things or reclassify them. So I think that's an important thing. I do understand, though, that in a time of attrition where you're losing some places, people, that may seem counterproductive, but I think it makes more sense to give the city manager that power and then continue the process of attrition. And I think we get a big bang for our buck because we've been needing that aspect done, and this allows that to be done. But I'm for keeping it on the agenda. If we don't have 3 votes to have it on it, then I would ask that it be placed on the agenda.
And just so I can go on record, when I looked at this, I couldn't look at the person because the person I really respect and does a lot. I looked at the job description, And I thought we was going to have another conversation. I was actually going to meet with Kathy just to make sure I understood it. But some of the ones that was added one looked like an IT function, as far as the city website, the share information. So I wasn't sure if we were doing things that need to be done, or if we're just being written up, to, support the grade. And I see some other ones that were good initiatives. I wrote good on 3. These are the ones that was in red that shows the difference. So most of the good, I was really surprised. I didn't see a lot of grant stuff in here for her to be our grant manager and doing a superb job. On the last page on the experience is where I saw a community development block grant preferred on certain things. And so I was just hoping for more discussion, like this. If somebody was saying, okay, the reason we're doing this is because of this. Because if somebody asked me that, earlier we had talked about a 2.5% raise, and then one of the commissioners said that could even be a 1%. And then if another employee comes up to me and says, why is this, you gave this person a 9%? And I would like to be able to say why if that's what we, vote on. And I just thought we was going to discuss, because it got put off the one time it came up. And I went back and I've got 3 different papers that I was just going through, and I mean, they're good initiatives. Because I definitely don't want to lose the person. I just want to make sure we start with making our decision based on our needs. Because otherwise, we could actually do this for some other positions. And that was my only hesitation, tonight, of saying, this is what I want, I didn't want it on the agenda, but I wanted it to be discussed. Because we could, I could be totally off. Maybe I'm reading some of these lines wrong. That's why I wanted to get with Kathy, just to go through, what does this mean? Where's the grants that she's currently doing? I see it in black and white, but it doesn't say anything about grants. It's talking about conduct public hearings, implement property acquisitions, coordinate and direct administrative all projects, federal and state. That could be in the grant area. But some of the other ones wasn't even telling me. I didn't think it was for all that she does. I think she does more already than what was in her previous, if that was her previous job description, because that's the only thing I'm reading, is what I see in black and white. And I do realize, sure. Oh, yeah, sure.
I don't have the document with me that you're referring to, but that is, I recall it from the prior work session, so that's her existing job description, and then the red shows the added on items that she would be absorbing.
Would you like to hold?
Sure, that would be great. Thanks. So if the question was concern about her existing role in the grants function, that will stay unchanged. All of those responsibilities that she currently has with grants, she will continue with, so it's in no way being lessened.
Okay, and where's that at on her current thing where it says grant? I just couldn't find the word grant.
Well, it may be that we need to do a better job of incorporating that on this.
And I may have overlooked it. This is the discussion I wanted to have, and then, maybe we could move forward on it.
That's a good idea.
Commissioner Haynes, in glancing at it, and regrettably, I don't have the original, like the first page, so I'm wondering if something got cut. No, here's the first page, excuse me. I would take your suggestion to incorporate and better define that existing role. This is just a...
It look like a boilerplate.
Yeah, well, right. The new part is the red.
Right.
The other is what may have existed for, Rebecca, what's your hire date? 1/20/06. So it probably had like a 2006 date. So the focus was really on the red items. But your suggestion is well taken, that may be something that the prior, which wasn't revisited, the prior job description, which wasn't revisited as much, could use some clarification.
Okay.
To answer your question. While you're, were you through?
Yeah.
While you're here, do you have, like the position, the police department, that the public information officer, there's not, that's, is it that, maybe some question, that's just a duty assignment, correct? And no extra compensation?
No.
And that's where I guess I have concerns, time-wise, to spend, for the grants administrator, to spend time doing these other functions is a concern, but also just the 9% raise when we're not doing the same for others that have done, it just seems that, here's what I've heard. For the city manager department, everybody gets taken care of in that department, everybody else gets left out. And so it's a specific concern that I'm addressing. Again, it's nothing against the individual, as Commissioner Haynes said, it's not the person. But it's just the image it's going to send and the message it sends to the other employees. And it's a deep concern with the some of the feedback that I've got. And number two, I guess, do you have strong feelings one way or the other on this recommendation, or?
I do support the recommendation. Where the 9% came was, we looked at other organizations that had either someone by the title of public information officer. They were public entities, actually, and so we kind of tried to do some market share comparison. And then also in talking to Rebecca, it could be a role she could decline. She could say, it's not worth my trouble to write these extra articles and press releases for $50 or whatever it is. So there was a process of looking at market share, what seemed to be appropriate in terms of the responsibilities of that role. And I'd like to also respond to the concerns about that the employees under City Hall are taken care of. The employees in City Hall actually have probably some of the least career pathing through the city structure available to them. So I hear the opposite complaint, because in many of our departments, you can go from firefighter 1 to firefighter 2, or officer 1 to officer 2, tech 1 to tech 2. So there's a structure for them to career path. In City Hall, that doesn't exist as readily.
But my point being, we have a problem with morale, regardless of whether people know. I'm just saying, if you got discussions from our employees, that's what I'm trying to say. And I don't want to see us slide into that path again, because that doesn't bode well for anybody.
If I may, Your Honor. I think what we're trying to create with all of our directors, with all of our staff, is an organization that wants to achieve, wants to do better, wants to do more for the organization. And those employees will be rewarded. We're actually adding an additional position that many cities have separately from any other position. So we're taking the grants manager and we're adding the public information aspect. We're going to expect all social media to be incorporated, assistance with, as Kathy said, articles, press releases, just any information about the city, our newsletter. These are things that, in my opinion, I recognized that Frankfort was not doing very well. We don't toot our own horn. We have a lot of positive going on. So if you take that and couple it with the fact that we want to get high achievers in our organization, and in order to get high achievers, we're going to have to recognize them from a salary perspective. That's the accomplishment, that's the goal we're trying to achieve.
Well, unfortunately, I guess maybe you haven't been in the organization long enough to hear that that's having the opposite effect, because there are plenty of folks that are feeling like they have been passed over for raises. The longevity program got pulled, completely eliminated, and so there's a general feeling that the morale has gone. I'm just repeating what folks tell me, and I try not to listen to 4 or 5. I try to hear it from across the spectrum. And when I hear that, then I have got to think, based on how long I've been with this organization and seeing those trends and patterns, that when I see that to happen, I feel like I have to point that out as mayor and the person that a lot of folks will discuss those types of issues with, to say, okay, I understand that and I hear that. And I think it's the opposite message, and especially if we're going to eliminate, after you heard from the county prosecutor, the county attorney saying, send us more police officers so that we can keep up with animal complaints or other types of criminal complaints, and we cut a police officer position, and then we give someone else a 9% raise for doing the same job that another person in another department does as a duty assignment without extra pay, then I'm going to be concerned. I felt like we need to discuss that and address it, and my number one concern is to see the productivity of this community of city employees increase in terms of their productivity, rather, service level, and not go backwards. And I've been here when we've seen the opposite happen, when morale gets low and what happens. And I know Mayor Sauer's here too. Could probably tell you the same thing. And those of you that have seen the ups and downs know once that happens, it's very difficult without spending some time to recover from that. And that's my issue and my concern. And you're right, people do have these in other communities, and we talked about having a public information officer with someone who actually has that as their only position, and someone that has been on a career path as a public information officer, someone that's been media trained or actually has a degree in public relations or public affairs or communications or radio and television or journalism. And that's the only thing I would say is just, I don't want to send this message to our employees when we have to tell them, we cut longevity, we're not going to give you the raises that you're used to getting, you were getting, and I think they understand that. We've increased your health insurance cost, because we've got those, we have to pass them on, and I know sometimes we haven't been able to keep those under control more than others. I just will say, when I hear that from the organization and I see it, I can recognize a problem. Just thought I would point that out. And I didn't think it was, again, I certainly didn't want it to be towards a person, because it's not. I think the position needs to focus on grants, and we've heard a lot about why we don't have police department, the grants, some of those dried up, and I know they're not available, but now
Have you looked at the analysis of time off and how many that analysis shows of policemen we need to have?
Oh, I'm saying I was here when
No, have you looked at the analysis of time, or how many does it say we need to have?
Well, I think what you look at is...
Now, how many does it say we need to have?
I think
Based on the chief's analysis and the city managers, how many does it
I
say we need to
understand.
have?
It's like 61, 62.
Right, how many do we have?
Today?
62 is what we're going to have.
Well, first of all...
This is all personal. You are taking this personal and hurting this organization.
You are.
Nobody else is
For
going to
every
say
year
it.
you've
I'm
been
going to
here.
say it. It's a power struggle, and you're upset because they're hindering your power in the police. And you're hurting this woman here because of that. And it's all personal. It is personal. It's not the position. And we need to do what's right. And if that's what we want to do as commission, I'll support it. But let's get past all this stuff and call a spade what a spade is.
No, my concern is absolutely not towards an individual. It is having the experience of being here when we've had 70-some officers, people in the neighborhood saying, why don't we have bike patrol? Why don't we have the officers come? Because we don't have enough officers. And officers are being forced to work special details when they want to take time off, and they can't take time off because they have to cover special details to come in on overtime. And when I hear that and I see that decline, it concerns me deeply. And you pick up the newspaper every day and they're writing some story about another drug bust someplace, and people going through people's cars or going through breaking in people's houses to steal to get money for drugs. And for the life of me, I've always wondered why we can't stay ahead of the problems and try to keep up with that.
Because we don't empower our youth. We do not empower our youth here. You want to talk about things and do things, Mayor, but you know what? We're limited with money. You spent $14 million on a building across the street. We have children who are suffering that we give nothing to. You want to empower our youth, okay? Give them confidence to want to be here. We have nothing for them to do except for sex and drugs. And you want to talk about morale issues here? We had to cut longevity. That's another choice a previous commission had to cut. A tough decision that they had to make. We had to cut and make insurance policy changes because we had an insurance policy change that had been touched for 14 years because it was so rich. We had nothing to do. We have all these problems now, and you're a part of every commission that was on that. And I understand that you're pro-employee, I'm pro-employee too, but we still have tough decisions that we have to make. And there's employees here who are doing one hell of a job. And it's time to give them the respect they deserve, and I understand that she is not a police officer. And I know that you love your cops and you love your firefighters, well, I love my cops and firefighters too. And I love Rebecca Hall, and she does a fantastic job.
Well, I think you all are making it seems to me it is getting to be
I'm
about
done.
the person. But the thing I would try to say, Commissioner, is, yeah, when we had money to build a youth center in South Frankfort, we tried to do that. And we lost, I think Commissioner Bowers was for it. And we do want to do things for youth, which is why we're going to build this new
For 3 months out of the year, Mayor, 3 months out of the year, I'm talking about a year.
Well, for the record, we all supported the indoor athletic center, recreation center. And I think that's what we're doing now. We're looking at an RFP with the county to try to come up with what would be workable, what we could afford. But we still have to provide basic services, police and fire and garbage pickup and sewer pickup. But again, and Ms. Hall certainly was not my intent to mention any individuals or be against an individual's opportunity to move forward. That's not it. It's just based on my experience with how we were able to tackle problems in the past. More officers on the street, more firefighters does make a difference. We can decide to be at the minimum level, or we can decide to try to be on the front end and try to prevent criminal activity and try to stay ahead of that.
I'd just like to say, I think the decision for the commission to consider is whether you believe there's a need to increase communication to the community, to try to tell the good stories to the community, or not. If you feel like we're succeeding in getting word out about what we're doing, then we're succeeding. This isn't necessary. If you think that we need to improve our communication efforts, and back to, this isn't really the hard criminal stories that police may tell. This is more of the soft touch kind of stories to try to help the community see what are we doing in parks and rec, what are we doing in sanitation, something that kind of feel-good type stories. If you're satisfied with where we're at, then this may be the wrong direction. If you want the communication to improve, we would be hard-pressed to find a more cost-effective, affordable way to do that. Hiring a person certainly would cost more, and outsourcing certainly would cost more. So to me, it comes down to, do you want this service, or do you feel like we're already communicating at the level we need to be?
Well,
That's what I think.
We don't, I think we do things, it's going to be up to the media outlets whether they choose to write stories or cover stories on the television or newspaper.
But if we don't present it, they don't even have a choice. It's not going to be presented.
You know, Mayor, I know I brought this up several terms back, but when I was visiting Las Vegas many years ago, I turned on the local station, and there was, I can't remember what department it was, of city government doing a whole program on what this department's doing. And I think what they did was they rotated departments and did programs on their equivalent of our Cable 10. And I just thought that was so, you probably remember I suggested that we do that, because it was, they would go into detail about what this particular department was doing, and it was educational, but it was that soft touch that you're talking about I don't know if that would be a part of what the responsibilities here would be, but I think that would be something, maybe I went a little bit off task there, but
okay.
I think that would be good. Well, anyway, can I bring up something? Or are we still talking about this?
No, go ahead. Thank you, thank you.
Because we got a couple of weeks, right, to think, we got 1 week to decide what we're gonna do. Can I clarify?
Sure.
So I think we're not gonna cut back on the grant work, but we're gonna be doing more hours, an extra day a week or something, is that right?
What do you
I heard
question?
Commissioner Hedden talk about going from 4 days to 5 days, is what I heard over here a while ago. Are there gonna be any hour
The hours
increases?
changed. It, from a 4-day week to a 5-day week.
Okay, but the hours are increasing? Or
Um,
just the hours are gonna be spread across more days?
They'll be spread across more days. But Rebecca already does work the hours necessary for her job, and we've added significantly to her position.
Okay. Any other discussion? Any other items on the agenda that commission would like to discuss?
Commissioner, are you ever going to bring up your idea again? I thought about what Commissioner Roach said in the previous meeting about the COLA, and, you know, I have to think things through for a little while, but I would probably be willing, Commissioner Roach, to go with just the 1.5, if that's what the rate of cost of living increase is right now. We're looking at possibly not putting that storm water utility in place, and you're talking about where we're going to find more money. Well, that 1% from 1.5 to 2.5 would be $200,000. And I think I heard the figure of, we would need, did I hear the figure, 1 million a year to cover, is that what I heard?
In that area, 800,000
One-
to 900,000.
1 million a year to cover what we would be doing with that stormwater utility fee every year. So that would be like 1/5 of it right there. I mean, I don't know, I'd be willing to support you if you would take it up to 1.5 instead of 1.
Well, I put that, I thought we could, only because, given how much meeting we've had today,
Yes.
I may not be as sharp as I need to be, but
Okay.
I do think that we can talk about
That later?
at the meeting on the 19th,
Okay.
because we're dealing with the budget, correct? And so you could deal with, discuss budget-type issues.
Okay.
Is that correct, everybody? So
Well, I think we should think about
I think
that.
that's something to look at, because also if you don't have a fee, you don't have to raise quite as much money. So actually, it may be closer to a fourth than a fifth. So it may be even more than that.
Right, and that would just be one little place where we could find some more money. And if we cannot have to put a new tax on our constituents, on ourselves, that would be also.
So I sure will bring it up.
Okay.
Is that it?
That's it for me, I think.
No other agenda items? Do we have any staff reports?
Nobody coming up now. Nobody wants to come up.
Bring that flag jacket.
I'd like to request a late add to the consent agenda. We did a bid on our Vector dump pit and like to get it on the voting meeting for the 19th.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I'd like to request a late add to the consent agenda. We did a bid for our Vector dump pit. We've got the bids in, and we'd like to get it on the voting meeting for the 19th.
You said a Vector dump pit.
Vector dump pit,
Okay.
yes.
Can you spell that? I'm not sure what you're saying. I don't know if
It's
I need a hearing aid
Yeah,
or
it's a
something.
piece of machine that sucks stuff out of the sewer line, and they need a place to dump
okay.
it.
Yes.
Okay.
Quick, that's a quick and easy.
It's like a great big wet dry vac
Okay.
mounted on a truck.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there an objection?
No, sir.
I would just like permission to add to the agenda, do about a 5 or 10 minute presentation on the ISO rating that we got, where we kind of fell on the rating. Hand you
Great.
out something and shouldn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes. Right, thank you.
Just read it too.
Okay, is that it? All right. Any old business?
No, sir.
Okay, at the next meeting next week, we cannot talk about any old business, right, or any new
It's not on
business?
It's on there.
But you can get it put on the agenda
You want
between
something
now
on
and
there?
12.
Just-
Between now and 12 on tomorrow. Okay, if I wake up in the middle of the night and think of something, I'll give you a call, Ramona.
She'd probably rather have an email.
I'll send you an email.
Whatever.
All right, what about new business?
Mayor,
Yes.
I apologize, I was not quick enough. If I could add a first-party outsourcing collection agreement to the agenda, that's something that the fire department may need for their collection services that are being transferred from our old vendor to our new vendor. So if I could add that, I'd appreciate it.
No objection.
There is something that I would kind of like, I don't know, it's not really an item, and we don't have commissioner comments anymore.
Thank you.
All right, I'm sorry, did I interrupt? Are you done?
I am done, so I was just thanking you all for letting me add it.
It's May, it'll be the May vote meeting, and I think that it might be nice to remind the public through that cable 10 what to do if somebody, it won't be really an item for discussion, but if somebody could announce to the public, maybe the newspaper might want to run something, but, you know, starting here in the next few weeks, we're going to be getting those people going door to door trying to sell us things and do things that might not have a business license. And I think that we know what to do. Mayor, you and I, last year, were on the phone calling at the same time. But a lot of people don't know what to do with that. I think that it might be important to remind people, when we have the cable access, that they should ask for a business license, and if people can't produce one, to call it in and report it, and how to do that so that we can kind of nip that stuff in the bud early on. Because I know that when I ask for a business license, they seem to flee the neighborhood. And so if we can do that early on, educate people as to that. So can that go on as an announcement for somebody to do that at the next meeting?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So the door-to-door solicitors or itinerant merchant, would that be more like itinerant merchant?
I think it
Would be
would
the-
be.
Okay.
I better understand door-to-door better.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, any other
Itinerant license?
new business?
I had a quick question. I don't know if it should be new or old, though. For fire, what percentage of collections do we get for EMS? I think is it 60-ish?
It is about 60-ish.
Is it starting to improve yet from the new service?
I think it is starting to improve. One of the things I think is starting to be a little more accurate is I think before probably the previous billing company took the low-hanging fruit, and what was a little hard to get, they probably didn't. With that being said, about 65 to 70%, in fact, I just pulled those numbers up, and I'll put something in the update this week about it. The majority of our payers are either Medicaid, Medicare, or Medicaid, Medicare, or self-pay. Medicare they cut it way back. So then we can then balance the bill for 20% of it. Medicaid, we take what they give us and smile and go on if they give us anything. And then the self-pay is a very low, we recoup very little of this.
What do we do to try to get the money?
We turn it over to a collections company, which is, I think it's been more, I think one thing that's probably right now, I'm not talking about mounds and mounds of money, but I think that's probably a bit more helpful right now with the new billing company is they go through that billing cycle in 120 days, they figure out what the problem is. And at the end of 120 days, if they say, I know I'm billing the right person, getting it to the right address, and this was a legitimate claim, 120 days it goes to collections. Previously, the billing company, and that's part of the contract that's on that's on for the next meeting. There's cases, we've got bills out there for two years, and it's, I hate that the oversight, we thought it was working. And now that we're getting out of it, we realize that it wasn't working the way it needs to. So I'm not going to say the collections is bringing in mounds of money, but I think it is much more beneficial when you say this claim is from 4 months ago as opposed to 2 years ago.
Thank you.
And if I may,
Good.
I do want to point out that on some of the collections, the ambulance service is in a tough spot because you get a call from an individual or entity to be taken to the hospital, and you may get a call from the same person with regularity. And this person is known to not have any assets, but do you say, sorry, we're not going to transport you out to the hospital? And so we do have some people that owe substantial amounts of money to the city for ambulance service who are completely without assets.
I understand. And I thought that
They don't have the money to pay it.
I will put something in the update as to about what we're collecting right now.
Okay. And just so we know, we've got 7.8 on our consent agenda deals with a new agreement with dealing with EMS billing. Any other new business? If not,
Just make sure you put that announcement section on the agenda for you, Mayor, to explain.
we'll call the appropriate step person.
Okay.
Probably, would that come under, I
I'll
guess?
just hit announcements.
Okay.
And list it.
There you go.
Any other new business? If not, you all want to
Move adjournment?
move by Commissioner Bowers, second by Commissioner Haynes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign.